opening the community comment for closed session items. Anyone? Seeing no one approaching the dais, we'll close public comment and move to closed session. Thank you. I would like to open the session with a report from closed session.
Good evening. With respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Ed Code 35146 and 48912-20, Government Code Section 49060 and 49078, and the Family Rights and Privacy Act. In regards to student matters, recommendation for expulsion for student A. I move for the expulsion.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, roll call.
Roll call.
We need a roll call.
Where's the
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez-Marez?
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado?
Aye.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Shaw?
Aye.
Trustee Cross?
Aye.
And there's a second matter of readmission. I move for the readmission of student B.
Second.
Roll call.
Trustee Water?
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz?
Aye.
Trustee Gonzalez-Marez?
Aye.
Trustee Hurtado?
Aye.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Shaw?
Aye.
Trustee Cross?
Aye.
In closed session, the board took action to approve the following staff recommendations. Pursuant to Section 54957B for the 2019-20 school year, the following administrative staffing assignments are being made. On a motion by Trustee Water and a second by Trustee Martin, the board voted 7-7 to appoint Manuel Ruiz to the position of Chief Technology Officer. So we welcome him. And then in regards to employee settlements, on a motion by Trustee Garcia, second by Trustee Water, the board voted unanimously to approve a settlement agreement with employee number 642. On a motion by Trustee Gracia, second by Trustee Shunk, the board voted unanimously to approve the settlement agreement with employee number 1186. The roll call vote was as follows. It was unanimous. In regards to conference with legal counsel, anticipated and/or existing litigation, OAH settlement case. In addition to pursuant to Section 54956.9, the board voted to approve the settlement of OH case number 2019-070142. On motion by Trustee Shunk and second by Trustee Gracia, the board voted unanimously. That's all the report. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to move to the flag salute, and if I could have the Honorable Leon Garcia lead us in the salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is recorded for live streaming and archiving on the district YouTube channel. I'd like to move to the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gonzalez-Marez, seconded by Mr. Gracia. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Approval of minutes. Approval of the minutes of the board meeting of the June 13th board meeting.
So moved. I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Waters, seconded by Ms. Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? None. Board meeting notes for June 20th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Shunk, seconded by Ms. Water. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions?
June 13th.
The 20th.
Aye.
One abstention. Minutes for special board meeting of July 16th.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, second by Ms. Jankowicz. All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Abstain.
3 abstentions. Thank you. Let's see, do we have anyone here representing constituency groups? Other than American Canyon? No.
None of our unions are here tonight.
What's that?
None of our unions are here tonight. I don't see any of them.
Okay. We are moving to public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the audience may address the board on any school-related matter that is not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any issues raised during this section of the agenda, in as much as board action is limited to posted agenda items. Speakers are requested to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. So I am, if your name isn't called during this period, it's because your topic is part of an agenda item. So with that, Angelica Telicia, you'll have to forgive the pronunciation, and Velma De La Rosa.
Turn the mic on, yes.
There we go. Good evening, Superintendent, President, I was going to say Chair, President and Board. My name is Angelica Tellechea. I'm here representing the Mexican American Vintners Association. They have contracted me to work out hopefully a partnership between the Dominguez Dream and the school district. We're very excited about it and what those possibilities could look like, and hopefully meeting with the superintendent and others with you. We did bring some folders for the board so that you can be better informed, and we just kind of wanted to come and put a face with the faces. And so at this time, I know we have 3 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to Velma De La Rosa, who is the Executive Director of the Dominguez Dream. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Like she mentioned, I am Velma De La Rosa. I am the Executive Director for the Dominguez Dream, and we are very much looking forward to forging a partnership with one of the schools or more than one of the schools with your district. Our organization is a 501c3 nonprofit that is committed to working with Title I schools and addressing the achievement gap and partnering with schools to develop plans focusing on our 4 cornerstones of literacy, ensuring students are reading at grade level by 3rd grade, bringing STEAM programming and the arts to schools, supporting with technology integration, parent engagement, and supporting with enrichment activities. We're very excited at the opportunity and look forward to moving this forward and partnering with one of your schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a small point of reference that I forgot to say is that MAVA is the fiscal sponsor for this. So thank you.
Steve Green.
Hi. Just a few comments. I just want to talk about educational programming. Educational programming for our children is more important than anything else. Feelings, emotions, and passion must be focused on our kids' educations. All decisions must be viewed and taken from the perspective of maximizing our children's educational programming. Decisions that don't take that view put our children at a competitive disadvantage, rob from their futures, and worsen our community. At a minimum, educational programming must return to last year's standards. So here's what we know. Our middle school children's educations are already being degraded with 7 periods eliminated. And electives are not elective. They are required for our children to be competitive. The state doesn't fund education adequately. Fewer students mean less funding. The AC has to step up and fund the gap between what the state provides and what it costs to restore electives at ACMS and retain electives for 9th and 10th graders at ACHS. District insolvency degrades educational programming and simply cannot occur. When we talk about going forward with projecting enrollment and everything in regards, and this is it absolutely focuses on how we can keep the educational program, because it's all about making sure we have enough students and making sure that we are able to have the money to be able to keep the educational programming. We expect that the district's demographic study is the one that has the available and is the only available scientific and evidence-based reference for making decisions about enrollment trends. AC public school current and future parents are the primary stakeholders in this conversation. And in closing, I'd just like to say we're not talking about a field of dreams. We're talking about that the prize is the best educational programming for our children in the Bay Area, and we must keep our eyes on the prize and pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanjay. And then after Mr. Sanjay, Jamie Potter.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. I'm here to voice my concern over the elimination of 7th period for the SEHS. These electives, like the robotics and the VAPA programs, are what actually makes our school kids become more competitive with the other school kids in the Bay Area. I understand that the school board have to juggle their priorities to make ends meet in terms of finances, but I'm here to urge that the kids' future must be the top priority. Programming is actually what makes a school kids learn. A great, nice building is visually enticing, but can't be prioritized over the real education. Thank you.
Evening. My name's Jamie Potter. I'm part of this group of people that have been working the last 18 months to help save the 7th period. And first, I want to say thank you for doing that for 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. I wanted just to make a quick point, though, what happens when we take it away at 6th grade. So my boys, Nicholas and Gabriel, entered the middle school this year. Their first choice elective was robotics. They had a hope to get into 0 period PE so that they could take band. They're 2 of the 4 trombone players that are at the middle school. It looks like 0 period PE is not going to work out, so they'll have to make a decision whether to enter the band and drop the great program that Ms. Lee has, or to continue with Ms. Walden. What happens, and this is the important point, if they don't go into Ms. Walden's class now, they won't go into her class in 7th or 8th. And they won't join Mr. Day's program here, because it's going to be very difficult for a young kid to miss a year of the program and feel that out of step. So I know we've already eliminated the program for 6th, but as we consider the impacts, I thought it might help to have a real example with real kids. Thanks.
Gina Griggs, I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm confused. Is this an agenda item that we're jumping ahead?
You want to handle it, Trustee Hurtado, or do you want me to?
Your topic is programming.
Right. Is that on the agenda?
Programming is not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda.
Okay.
Educational programming is not on the agenda.
Okay, then I'll go ahead. Good evening, thank you very much. I just wanted to share a quick little personal story. I have a 19-year-old. She is headed back to her 2nd year of college in Amsterdam. And she is in a 3-year accelerated baccalaureate program there, where she will graduate with her major in humanities and her minor in social sciences. She then wants to go on and get her master's and her PhD and teach at the collegiate level. And she attended ACHS, and she would not have gotten into that program if she hadn't taken all of the honors and AP classes and the electives and everything here that allowed her to have all of the credits in the classes that she needed to be qualified to even apply. So I'm super proud of her. And she's kind of leading the way for going to college in another country, which we want the world to be smaller for our children and the opportunities to be many. And so I just think that programming is where it's at. It doesn't matter if it's in a portable, if you have the class and the teacher. It doesn't have to be a big, fancy classroom. You know, there's only 2 foreign languages offered here at the high school. I would rather see them bring back German and French than build a shiny building. So that's my story, and I think it's going to benefit all of our students, including my 10-year-old. So thank you for your time.
Heidi Zipe, or Zipe, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Zape, Heidi Zape.
Zape.
I'll reiterate what some of these folks have been saying, just to stand up and tell you guys that we are appreciative of the efforts that were made at American Canyon High School this year to keep 9th and 10th grade electives intact. The programs are full. We hope to see you again at choir and band performances this year. I'll reiterate what Gina said. No matter what the building looks like, whether it's old or new or up or down, or full or empty, it's the programming and the classes and the teachers that make a school. And I think that I just hope that the board can keep those things in mind as big decisions need to be made. It is what happens inside the walls, not what the walls look like on the outside. My kids have both had a great experience at American Canyon Middle School, one that's still there. And I hope that they can continue to have the breadth of services and programs offered without having any trimming for other reasons. Thank you.
Fontaine Segrist.
Hi there, my name is Fontaine Sigerquist, and I am a teacher in the district. I've been teaching physical education in our district since 2003. I've been teaching in American Canyon since 2005 and came up to the high school the second year it opened. I have been, as of last year, I was one of the members of our health task force, and part of our concern was, obviously the social and emotional well-being of our students in our district. Being a physical education teacher, that has been impacted into our classrooms. And I think the social and emotional well-being of our students needs to be better served with the fact that the way our contract is written currently, that our PE classes, their goal is to limit them to 46 students per class, but with obviously the budget cuts right now, as we've heard, we have our classes, being stripped in terms of sections and the number of students that were being asked. So I know when people most likely think of PE, they probably think back to either in the movies, the stereotypes of just, dodgeball, throwing out balls, basketball. But if you were to really take time and look at the standards of the California State Standards of Physical Education, not only are standards 1, 2, and 3, which most of us associate with physical education, but standards 4 and 5 are very heavily focused on the social and emotional and communication and bonding that goes along with the social development of young children. And unfortunately, with the number of students that we currently have in our contract, which I know we have 2 more years to go, but it's really hard to be able to help the emotional and social well-being of our students with the fact that we don't have standalone health. And so it is all being placed in physical education classrooms. And it's hard enough just to get to know, since I can have up to 230 contacts in a year, because PE is exempt from the class size restrictions of only 168 contacts, that being able to just make connections with our students, let alone giving them a rich, vital PE program, as well as a quality health program that they vitally need for their ability to deal with, current situations, the stress of life, conflict resolution. All of those things need a lot more time, and with full physical education curriculum, as well as the expectation for a full health curriculum with class sizes in the high 40s, it's not doing our students a service. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Those are all the speaker cards I have for public input. The rest of the cards will be, the rest of the people will be called when your agenda item comes up. Thank you. Board of Education, communication. Any, Mr. Gracia?
So it's been a busy couple weeks. We had a lot of welcome back activities that I attended as much of as I could, considering that I had court both days, but otherwise been trying to get back in the swing of focusing on this board projects.
I was able to attend the last few hours at Camp Sped, the closing day, which was for our special educators, all working to get better at what they do. And I was able to attend Dr. Massetti's start of school welcome back here in this room.
I had the opportunity to do a meet and greet with Napa County Hispanic Network, and we had over 22 young women. It just kind of happened that way, that we handed out scholarships to these young ladies. None of the men showed up. I think they were a little intimidated because there was 22 that were offered. And we had the opportunity to shake their hands and see where they're going and what their next steps are. For those that aren't aware of Napa Hispanic Network and what they do, they offer scholarships to first-generation Latinos, and not necessarily for their great grades, but those that want to continue on with their education. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank the City of American Canyon, the community, for coming out. It's always a pleasure coming out to the City of American Canyon. Also, it's our first week back to school. As the next few weeks unfold, I'll be scheduling the schools in my walkthrough through my area, which is Area 5, and then move along to the rest of the district schools. So welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, it was an exciting welcome back. I attended Dr. Massetti's address to the school district on Monday of last week. A room packed of educators and staff from certified to classified. So it was really a lot of great energy in the room, just everyone really eager to get the school year going on a personal level, helping my nephew enroll into Napa High. So really excited because I'm an alumni of Napa High. And so it was really great to see that coming. I have many other nieces and nephews in the school district, so just really excited to get them all talking about school, getting their class schedule. Are they ready? Where are they, going to talk to their counselors? So a lot of that action that happens that makes our school district very busy and buzzing with lots of energies and questions and last-minute things. I couldn't attend the Napa Junction ribbon cutting. My apologies. Wish I could have made it. I was in a community organizations active in disaster meeting addressing how do we prepare in case of a disaster for our community-based organizations, talking about language access plans, so making sure there's appropriate information going out simultaneously in both in English and Spanish, and was really proud to be able to highlight, although there's a lot of work to do, and Dr. Massetti knows this, in ensuring that language went out in English and in Spanish when, for example, the fires hit in 2017. And so, they did videos and all that, so using that as an example for other institutions to utilize as modes of communication, because we know communication is so important. So lots of just energy there, and myself just really getting eager to that motion when school starts, all these bits and pieces start to move, and it's always fun to drive my nieces and nephews to school because just you're part of that community, so it's great to be part of that.
I'll be quick. I attended the City of Napa meeting where the focus of Chief Plummer remained safety and security. The security component is embedded in the tech portion of our bond on our security cameras. We're discussing video management systems. We currently have the Gen-Tech system. I won't go into detail, but there was dialogue. The SRO agreements have been completed. We applied for a tobacco prevention enforcement education grant for $1.6 million for an additional SRO. It's pending. Fencing, we're looking for installers. We will go out to bid in approximately 30 days, but this was a couple of weeks ago, so that's been a shortened time frame. Assessing to see if we need DSA approval based on the height and attachment requirements, which applies to Donaldson Way, Shear, McPherson, because these schools have the most accessible and multiple points of entry. The community will still be able to access fields and playgrounds during school hours, and we are committed to community access and understand the importance of facilities use. I don't want to go bore you guys to tears. We have a 40 to 50% diversion in recycling, a huge improvement for our school district. We are at 69% citywide. Our goal is to get to 75% in 2020. There was dialogue around the 7-Eleven committee, and if you're interested, please go to our website. It has a complete schedule when the meetings are, when the timing of the final meeting for the presentation of the 7-Eleven committee to the board. So that is all available to you online. That is that meeting, and I'll switch over quickly to Yountville. I also attended the Yountville meeting. Again, the primary focus was the 7-Eleven committee, the school closure and consolidation committee, and details, as I said, are online. There were questions regarding Stonebridge community and how many kids attend the school, and what does the footprint look like for moving that school. What is the committee going to assess? Looking at trends. We talked about enrollment and the issue of declining enrollment. People are not enrolling kindergarten children here. And info based on demography reports report that that's up and down the state, and our decline is far more dramatic than many other places. And the demographer report is again online. And we talked a little bit about public use of facilities as well, and repurposing of properties. And that is it for my report.
Heavens, well, compared to you all, I've been an utter slacker. I've missed the opening festivities last week because I was off doing family business in the wilds of West Virginia. And however, I did return, and I'm setting up my appointments to go visit my schools, and then some. I'm particularly interested in dropping in and visiting a school outside my territory, but hey, they're all our schools. Pueblo Vista, because they have an interesting writing program. And, last night I visited with a former student, always fun, and he just accepted a position as a lecturer at San Francisco State, so I'm very thrilled about that. He went back east for his master's degree. And then I did watch the 7-Eleven meeting recording. I didn't attend the meeting because I was afraid I might inhibit people, but apparently that's impossible. And I watched the recording and swung by this morning and had a brief chat with the principal of Shearer School, a school that my children attended.
I'll go in then.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No.
President Hurtado, go ahead.
It's okay, I'm trying to, I keep forgetting.
Yeah, no problem.
I attended the Latino Leadership Luncheon last week, where we had education leaders as part of a panel. Dr. Massetti gave a great presentation on what's going on with the school district. We had Dr. Ron Kraft. We had Dr. Jose Granda, and one of our former board members, Carlos Hagedorn, who, again, reminded us of the great work that's being done at Vintage High School with young Latinos and Latinx. I drove around the schools in my area and outside my area on opening day, which is probably not a good idea, but with all the parents scurrying to get their children on to school. But things were going smoothly. And I also attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for Napa Junction And I want to thank our district personnel for all the work they put in. I'd like to thank the members of the American Canyon City Council and the mayor, Mr. Mayor, who showed up for the ribbon cutting in force. We appreciate that. It's amazing what we can do when we partner on projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Massetti.
Great. So I'm actually going to first have my administrative leadership team, my assistant superintendents are going to give their reports along with the school planning and construction facilities update, and I'll close the reports for the evening. So we'll start off with Ms. Marianne Valles, our assistant superintendent of instructional support services.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board and American Canyon community. I have 3 items I wanted to share tonight from the Division of Instructional Services. On the Tuesday before school started, we had over 200 paraprofessionals participate in a full day of learning that was focused on general guidelines of their work, employee safety, health care, and behavioral support. I also wanted to provide the board and community with a summary of the accomplishments of the CTE Career Tech Ed programs in Napa Valley Unified. Last year, over 1,700 high school students participated in CTE programs. We have 10 industry certifications in areas from Adobe and design to first aid to food handler to OSHA woodworking. Last year, 346 students earned certifications in at least one area of study. Here in American Canyon High School, 33 students received a work-ready certification after attending a 3-week after-school course covering topics such as work ethic, customer service, teamwork, communication, and financial literacy. I think I know people who need this class. We have 32 UC-approved courses offered through the Career Tech Education programs, and 70 students earned college credit while taking CTE courses last year as high school students. Finally, as you know, we have a Professional Development Day planned for October 11th. Many site and district voices, teachers, paraprofessionals, union leaders, and management all contributed to the planning and organizing. I'm proud of the breadth of offerings available to our teachers and our non-classroom, our certificated teachers, our certificated non-teachers, and our paraprofessionals. Over 80 sessions will be available, and careful attention has been given to ensuring that all of the participants will find relevant and valuable learning, from a high school math teacher to a transitional kindergarten teacher to a counselor and to a special ed paraprofessional. Presenters are a blend of teachers and academic specialists, partners, and guest facilitators. All professional development is driven by the NVUSD strategic plan and aligned around the themes of standards and literacy, instruction that works, and multi-tiered systems of support. It's exciting to provide our staff with an opportunity to learn and grow together. In closing, I want to thank the instructional services team for their work toward planning, and especially the district academic specialists who've really been the leaders in making this day a reality. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dana Page. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. I'd like to share with you that last Friday, we had our first ever HR department retreat, which was held in the WAPO room at the district office. We started by learning more about our individual work styles and how to work as a team, enhancing each other's strengths and helping us develop in areas of growth. And we spent a lot of time looking at every goal of our strategic plan and drawing connections between our daily work in HR and how we support the district in achieving all 6 goals of the strategic plan. Finally, we affirmed our mission as an HR department, which is to help all NVUSD employees be the best that they can be in order to serve our students. Our next steps are to set actionable goals and hold ourselves accountable to our almost 2,000 employees to achieve this goal. Another highlight this month in HR is the launch of our new digital portal for efficiently and effectively managing our evaluations system-wide, including everyone from bus drivers to counselors to managers. The portal will house all evaluations, including our recently redesigned teacher evaluation, which you'll be hearing more about over the course of the year. and our new manager evaluations. The rest of the evaluations for our classified and pupil services will also be on the digital portal, as is for now, but we are launching work this year to revamp those evaluations as well. We're looking forward to making sure every one of our close to 2,000 employees has a meaningful and growth-provoking evaluation experience. And again, our mission in HR is to help all NVUSD employees be the best that they can be. Thank you.
I can't do this without a computer in my hand. I don't know if you noticed or not. But since we last met, we've been working feverishly to get some data together for you tonight around enrollment. You'll see a lot of that work. You've seen some of it already around the 711 committee. Also in the background, we are working very hard in the business office to bring the unaudited actuals to our next board meeting, which you will see. Thank you very much.
Mike Pearson, Assistant Superintendent of Operational Services. Good evening, President Hurtado, trustees, Dr. Musetti. Thank you for the opportunity for us to provide you with an update of the operational services. We've had a very successful start to the 2019-20 school year. Specifically, our NVUSD maintenance and operations staff ensured that all 32 campuses sparkled inside and outside, and we're ready to welcome all students and staff on the first day of school. Food service continues to improve menu selections for K-12 students, while providing nutritious and sumptuous meals. I had the specific pleasure today of going to Silverado Middle School and eating buffalo chicken sliders, and they were actually extremely good. So thank you to the food service for that. That was at Silverado Middle School. Transportation, working collaboratively with all school site principals last year on bell schedules, was able to streamline bus routes. That has resulted in improved efficiency and timeliness of our school bus routes. And lastly, the directors and assistant directors who comprise the operational services team have begun to meet collaboratively on a weekly basis for the first time ever, using the NVUSD strategic plan as our guiding document. So thank you. I'd like to now introduce Kelly Jurgensen from Van Pelt Construction Services, who oversees our school planning and construction department. Kelly.
Trustees, President Hurtado, Dr. Musetti. Two brief updates on what's been going on since our last meeting, two exciting updates. We had the first day of school at our new campus at Irene Snow Elementary, and it was beyond exciting. Along with just finishing another successful project for Measure H, I think seeing the staff and the students and the change just in attitude and culture on the campus, they really were troopers for that year in temp housing, and the looks on their faces when they got to occupy their new classrooms was really amazing. Additionally, we held a groundbreaking ceremony at Napa Junction Elementary School's new site. As a lot of you mentioned, it was a great event, and if you were not there, you missed out on seeing the skills of Mayor Garcia and Principal Drago on the earthwork equipment. So you missed something special. We are looking forward to a very successful project over at Napa Junction Elementary and seeing more smiling, excited faces when we open that school. So thank you.
Great. So I'll close out tonight's reports. I want to thank the assistant superintendents for all their hard work. They're leading across their divisions. And I hope that you can hear in our reports as the school year moves forward here in the 1920 school year, that our assistant superintendents are ensuring that we're working more as a system, less in silos, hearing alignment of their work against our new strategic plan, our 6 strategic goals, and all of the key initiatives for the collective good of all students in NVUSD. And I just want to dovetail on Kelly's comment regarding the opening of the Snow campus. It was incredible for me to see at the Snow campus the new technology, the Measure H funded technology. We've used that as our pilot site before we launch nearly $25 million of technology across the school district that is going to be touching all 900 classrooms across the school, all programs, K-12, TK-12 actually, and every building, every hallway will have access to the model of technology that was established there at Snow. It was incredibly exciting to be there for the back to school night, which was actually Tuesday night before school started. The first day of school, as many of you know, because we have many parents in the room, was last Wednesday. And every teacher had their Promethean board up, running, used. They were interacting with it to set protocol and procedure with the parents and let the parents know what was coming ahead in the classroom. So it was really great to open up a school where the technology was working. And so I really want to thank all the voters of Measure H, because through the program, the Measure H program, we've ensured for real that our students are going to have a gold standard of technology across every school, and that we're creating equitable access to that standard of technology. So it's not a world of this school has this while another school has that. We have a gold standard here for every student in NVUSD, and Measure H is allowing for us to execute that in terms of our implementation of our technology plan. I just want to start out by saying, and this is going to be a long one because I'm here in American Canyon, and we love you. We had a great experience last year bringing our board meeting out to American Canyon. I know it's been a practice to come once a year. We had our regular slated board meetings. We actually have one, September 26th was our fall one. And after the joyous experience of coming out here last year, I told my administrative assistant, my executive assistant, Vera Morales, I want 2 scheduled, one in the fall and one in the spring. So we'll be out here September 26th. We have a second one scheduled in the spring. And then we're here, of course, because we have a topic that we know is very relevant to the American Canyon community, and so we've got a third board meeting out here tonight. So I'm overjoyed about the opening of the 2019-2020 school year. You know, organizations show their strength, their values, their true colors under times of distress. And despite many of the financial challenges that you've been hearing me talk about over the course of my first year, that both me and my team are working hard to address along the school board members to my left, we're navigating very complicated issues as a result of our current enrollment and financial picture. These are topics that you're going to hear about tonight on our agenda, topics that our board will continue to have to consider and discuss this evening and other evenings. Despite all that, our principals and our vice principals have worked hard to ensure kindergartners through 12th grade have a warm, caring school community and campus to either attend for the first time or to return to after a long summer break. Our custodians, our office staff, our maintenance workers, our clerical staff, our groundskeepers, our food service workers, our bus drivers, and all other support staff have also worked really hard to make sure that we had a smooth start to the school year across 32 campuses. Then you've got counselors, you've got social workers, you've got nurses and psychologists that have also been busy to make sure that our students in this current school year will have the support both inside and outside of the classroom that they need to be successful as NVUSD students. And lastly, I want to thank and recognize all NVUSD teachers. If you're an NVUSD teacher, can you please stand? Stand. Come on now. Okay, NVUSD, there we go, we have an NVUSD teacher. Any other, where's my PE teacher, my health teacher that was here? There she is. Okay, we have a couple in the room. Give them a warm round of applause. Because I walk dozens of classrooms. You know, since my start here, I've logged all of my school visits, and in my 14 months here, I've done over 100 school visits, which then turns into hundreds of classrooms. I've walked dozens of classrooms during this first week of school, and in fact, I visited all 5 NVUSD schools here in American Canyon, and I cannot express enough how impressed I am by the care, the attention, and the commitment I observed in our NVEA educators as they do what amazing educators do at the beginning of the school year, which is build culture, make sure they get to know their students, make sure students get to know one another, establish procedures and protocols, and if you're a kindergarten or first grade teacher, you tie lots of shoes. I even had the opportunity to tie shoes 3 times this first week of school and got to see all kinds of adorable colored Converse that apparently are very in with the primary students. Being in these classrooms is a really great reminder of our why we're all here. We are here to educate students. So circulating around all of this heartfelt goodness that our children and teachers bring to their classrooms along all of our other staff, we know our school district is facing challenging issues. And as we come together to do business at board meetings like these, it's important to remember our why. Tonight's business has drawn a substantial crowd here in American Canyon and a high degree of community interest. I know myself, my administrative leadership team, and the school board, we welcome this engagement. We'd love for all of our board meetings to have this attendance. And to some extent, we also invite the scrutiny as we make tough decisions. That's to be expected given our positions. Earlier in this week, in our boardroom on Jefferson Street in Napa, we also observed high degrees of community engagement as we consider potential elementary small school closures that impact schools in the city of Napa and Yountville. As an educator, topics like school closures or halting the construction of an anticipated brand new facility are not joyful. Many superintendents work to avoid topics of this nature their entire career. And in my first 14 months as your new superintendent of schools, I'm having to navigate these challenging topics. I'm sorry, I lost my place. In my first 14 months as your new superintendent, I'm having to navigate these challenging topics because of the circumstances the organization is facing. I'm happy and honored to serve in challenging environments, so despite the complexity, I feel privileged to serve as the NVUSD superintendent. With all that being said, I wanted to share that I'm a very driven and positive person. I want you to know that as we deal with some of these challenging issues. And as an educational leader, I believe that when times get tough, it's an opportunity to get very clear. It's a time to develop laser-like focus on our mission and our goals, and to unveil what our principles and values are. For educators and publicly elected officials that are school board members, when pressed in a corner, that's very easy for us. We remember that we are about students. We are about the education of students. I know if you are here tonight, it's probably because you care about the children in our community as well. And I want to thank everybody in advance for attending, for their engagement, their respectfulness, and their focus on children. I have a few more words, given the topic that we're going to be addressing tonight that has this high degree of community interest. In anticipation of tonight's discussion around the construction of the proposed new middle school in American Canyon, I'd like to make a few remarks before we dive into the presentation, receive public comment, and discuss the matter shortly in the agenda. Tonight, you're going to see the results of weeks, hours, and hours of hard work. When I arrived here last July, I knew we had a financial situation that needed urgent correction. I quickly realized that we needed to improve our internal capacity to assess the level of urgency regarding our financial reality. So I put together the team who could conduct the analysis. The structural deficit, the steep declining enrollment, even in American Canyon, as you'll see tonight, and the need for future cuts became very real for me very quickly. In May, I came out here to American Canyon and I shared my preliminary findings with the community regarding a particular topic relevant to this community around the Measure H project and the new proposed middle school. I had to deliver disappointing news that based on my assessment thus far, I thought we needed to reconsider the need for a new middle school that we may not be able to afford to operate. One of several decisions that may need to be made in order to avoid fiscal insolvency. I also committed to the community to dive deep into the data, confirm the data, make sure that my initial assessment and recommendation was grounded in facts and evidence. Since May, we've done that work, even with the barriers that some of our partners have put in front of us. There have been many public claims that our data is inaccurate. There have been public claims that our data is incomplete. In the spirit of collaboration, once we prepared to share our hard work and findings, I've requested meetings with several entities in order to share the results of all of this hard work. I even requested a meeting with American Canyon city officials, many who are here tonight, so that both the school district and the city could come together around facts and figures, share data, and reach some sort of mutual understanding. Our team shared 2 hours of facts, figures, analysis, and findings, many that were agreed with by a developer that the city brought to the table for discussion. And despite public claims, we unfortunately did not receive any information. The development data or the analysis that's out there that should force us to reconsider has not been presented or produced for us to date. I just want to remind everyone that NVUSD is an educational institution. Remember that our mission is to educate your children. If you're a parent in the school district, can you please stand? So applause to these engaged parents for attending today. You can stay standing or you could sit, whatever makes you most comfortable. But I want our parents, many of which were here, I want to thank the words of Steve Green, Sanji, Mr. Potter, Ms. Griggs. I don't want to forget any of you, Heidi, our educator, Ms. Fontaine. I want to thank you because your opening comments or non-agenda items remind us of our mission, and our mission is to educate. And we're going to stay focused on that. We need to stay focused on that for our kids. That's what our kids deserve. It's not our job as an educational institution to solve traffic issues, to build infrastructure, to solve the affordable housing crisis that's happening in the Bay Area. And potentially, it's not our job to build facilities that we may not need for the purposes of educating. Roads, traffic, building, housing, that's the other local agencies' jobs. It's our job as a school district, as a unified school district, to remain fiscally solvent so that we can educate all children. Of course, it's most definitely our job to build new schools. It's our job to improve older ones. And it's our job to use bond money responsibly to ensure that our schools are viable and safe learning environments for all of our kids, not just some of our kids, all of our kids. But just building schools without looking at enrollment data and making sure we can operate them is irresponsible. If we divide our rising middle school population, which is much smaller than previous cohorts given the declining enrollment, you'll hear from Mr. Manguala and some of our consultants tonight, in American Canyon, we will stretch our resources very thin, much like we have over the last 5 years. Thus, that's why we're having similar dialogues with NVUSD families that live in Napa and Yountville around small schools. Students and teachers pay when we do not operate like a system. Let's get focused on the example here in this community. If we create 2 middle schools here in American Canyon with our declining enrollment trajectory, you tell me, right? I invite you to answer some of these questions. You tell me which transfer permits I deny or I accept, as families maybe try to flee a current facility to go to a shinier new one. At which school do we put a beloved music teacher? At which school do we put a beloved robotics program? Which school will benefit from a PTO that can raise more money? How do I communicate to teachers that we may need to suspend raises during a teacher shortage and potentially lose them to better paying districts and make it even more challenging for our own teachers to live in a community that's facing issues around affordable housing? The list of potential inequities we could create in this united community could go on. And we have a presentation to get to, so I won't. It's very, very easy for people to rally around this issue. It's very, very easy for it to become a divisive issue. It's a great one for the political arena. But remember, our mission is to educate kids. So see, when communities unite, and I want to talk about uniting, they're usually stronger. NVUSD has demonstrated a history of making some decisions for individual constituents without holding the big picture at times. In the past, while we were a growing school district, we could afford it. But this is no longer the case, so most importantly, making decisions based on some of the divisions within our district has created a non-sustainable approach to doing things and has ensured inequitable access to all sorts of important components of our educational programming. We have across this district inequitable access to technology. We have inequitable access to facilities. We have inequitable access to curriculum. We have inequitable access to programs. And we even have inequitable access to professional development. You heard Ms. Marianne Valles, she's working on fixing that, to our own teachers who serve the thousands of kids in this school district. That is just not okay. Now that our resources are stretched, we need to come together. We need to stay focused on making sure the district is fiscally responsible so that we can have more equitable access to a better education for all students. All means all. We are Napa Valley Unified School District. We are American Canyon. So let's get to work. Let's move forward so we can give our students the best education possible. That concludes my superintendent report tonight.
Thank you. Approval of consent agenda. Background information for these items is provided to the board prior to the meeting. A common motion takes action without discussion on roll call vote unless discussion of an item or items is requested by a board member or members.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Mr. Shunk.
Aye.
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 Item I. Point 1, presentation of NVUSD budget information, historical enrollment trends, and future enrollment projections based on demographic data with a focus on American Canyon schools. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the presentation first. Then we're going to have public comment. Once public comment is over, we will have board discussion, board questions and discussions. Mr. Manguela.
Good evening, Dr. Massetti, members of the board, and the American Canyon community. Thank you very much for coming out for my presentation. It's not very often that I get to talk about data in such a large crowd. It's very exciting. But, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Manguala, before you get started, we do want to let everybody know that all the presentation materials are on our district website, so you can go right to the homepage. There's a link right on the homepage, and it says American Canyon, this board meeting materials right on the homepage.
Yeah, they're saved as a PDF, so you can view them on your phone in case you can't see it all the way up at the front. So I'm going to start by talking about the agenda for tonight. So the agenda for tonight is I'm going to give you everyone a budget update. I'm going to talk about the letter that we have from the county office, talking about our need for substantial budget cuts. I'm going to review some verifiable data from the California Department of Education. When we talk about data, the most important thing is that people can trust our data. So all of the data that I'll be talking about tonight, you can find online. I will actually show you the screen that you can go to look at it. So the website is called DataQuest. I had some questions for a demographer, because originally when I started talking about this, I had some questions about how do you develop that number and so forth, and so I developed some questions which I hope the audience will support. What model are you using to predict future enrollment? Can you prove how accurate you are? How many new homes would you need to justify a new middle school? A little bit about the enrollment history of Canyon Oaks. From some of my research, I understand that there's some stuff that happened there in the past that brought demographers in question, and I want to make sure and share what I've learned. And then at that point, I am going to pass the presentation off to our demographer, Rob Murray. So at first, before I start with that, is I want to just kind of clarify the difference between an operating budget and a bond budget, right? So what we're saying tonight that I want to be really clear about is that we do have bond money to build a school. So that money is there. Here's the actual language from the what went to the ballot. The language talks about fixing earthquake damage, fire safety, and other stuff. And again, you can find this on the website. The part that we're trying to focus on tonight is that we do not have the operating funds, which are about $2 million, to operate a new middle school. And again, I'll get into the details of that in a little bit. So what to look for in a school budget, there are some things that you need to look for in a school budget. When you originally look at it, it looks complex. There's lots of forms, there's lots of lines, there's lots of account strings, there's lots of numbers. But there's some basics that everyone should look at and study. You need to look at enrollment trends. So is enrolling increasing or decreasing? That's exceptionally important because we derive the majority of our revenues based on enrollment. So again, students that come to school generate money. Deficit spending, meaning are we spending more money than we're bringing in? Napa Valley has a history of spending more money than they have brought in, typically because we went through a very long period of increasing enrollment, and that did recently switch. Reserves, do we have adequate reserves? Our board policy actually says that we should have a 7.5% reserve. We've been below that for a number of years, and we're going down towards the state minimum of 3%. Do we have unsustainable programs, such as very small schools? Are future cuts needed? What kind of cuts are needed? Or do you have an unfunded liability? In this case, what I'm talking about is a potential middle school. So here's some of the things I mentioned. This is an example of our reserve. So if you look at the graph on the bottom, you can see back in 2014, our reserve was at 8%, and over time, it's fluctuated between 4 and 3.6%. And so again, we're hovering right above the state required minimum. And so just to make this happen, we have had to make $7 million in cuts. And so you do see that in this year's budget, so $7 million in cuts. And so what we've done is we made the easiest cuts first. And so the cuts, and no cuts are easy, but what we tried to do is we tried to make sure and do cuts that were as far away from the classroom as possible. And again, our board policy is to have a 7.5% reserve, and our reserves are near the state minimum. This is an example of our multi-year report. So part of the reason that schools are able to survive on the little money that they have is that they're required to do a multi-year report. In that multi-year report, they're required to use the most correct data that they know at the time, and there's assumptions that are built into the model. And so as you can see from this model, again, just to throw that number out again, we made $7 million in cuts this year. We need to make another $1.6 million in cuts in 2021, and then the following year, we need to make another $5.6 million in cuts. So to put that into perspective, what $5.6 million is, this is not something that you solve through a bake sale. And remember, we can't use bond money for this. The way that you have to solve that, again, it would be the equivalent of cutting 56 teachers. And so we've already had to do that, and we hope to not have to continue to do that. And again, operating a new middle school, this is an important point. It is not in that budget. And so there is nothing in the budget that has been put aside to operate a middle school. If for some reason that we end up and decide to build a new middle school, the bond money is there, the operating money is not there, we would need another $2 million in cuts. So this is estimated operational costs for a new middle school. So a couple things to just kind of point out there. So what we're trying to do with this is, again, this is not every cost. It's not even close to every cost. Essentially what we said is, if you open up a new site, what would be unique to operating that site? Obviously, when you look up there, you don't see teachers, right? So that's the biggest expense that you have up there. Again, if you open up a site that has a high ratio of teachers and you have a really low class size, there's going to be a lot of additional support or a lot of additional cost to that. So again, about $2.1 million. The biggest item that you see on there a lot is you do see custodial and maintenance, and so that's pretty significant when you run a large site. So right now I want to talk about a term that or an agency that most of you might not know about unless you work in education, especially in the business side. So it's called the Fiscal Crisis Management Team. And so what they do is they help school districts ensure that they have the financial ability and management to not go bankrupt. And so what ends up happening is the county, if they don't approve our budget, they can actually call them on us and they can come out, and ideally they would just give us the guidance that we would need. If we don't accept that guidance, we could be taken over essentially by the state. And so this is an example of some of the work that FCMAT has done. And so this is a school district in the East Bay. So for privacy, what I've done is I have blued out the name, but they are famous for going bankrupt. So if you want to search, you could probably find it. But some of the things that they have, I just wanted to point out, we actually have a lot of things in common with them right now. And so not to ring a bell or anything, but we have a lot of things in common with them right now. So just a couple of the things that I noticed right off the bat: signs of fiscal distress, refusal to consolidate small schools, deficit spending, substantial reductions in fund balance, inadequate reserve levels, large increases in contributions to restricted programs, and lack of oversight of position control. So one of the things that we're doing, I mean, that's a term that we use, position control. One of the things that we're doing inside of the business office for every single position, so when somebody leaves, or if a new position wants to be added, we are taking the time to sign off in cabinet every Monday on every position to make sure that we do not add positions that aren't needed. Because ideally what we'll do is we'll find ourselves in a position to where instead of having to do mass layoffs, what we'll be able to do is through attrition, we have the ability to look and say, do we need to right size this classification? Do we need to right size the district office like we've been doing, and continue down that track instead of laying people off? So this is an example of the letter that we received from the county office, and so that is on the website. I encourage you to look at that letter. It lays out some very, very specific things that need to happen for our school district in terms of our finances. This was sent in April. So some of the things that are in the letter, both NVUSD and Napa County Office of Education recognize the need to make very, very substantial cuts in order for NVUSD to remain fiscally solvent. We need to make $1.6 million in cuts. I've said that. I don't want to be redundant. Currently, the district subsides its charter schools by not collecting full costs for facilities and overhead provided, right-sizing the district office, 7th period at American Canyon High School, maximizing class size. There's several small schools, including one with only 112 students. Maintaining small schools is inefficient and expensive. The proposed middle school would be smaller than 2 existing elementary schools in American Canyon. So that's not in quotes, that's something that I just want to make sure and point out to the group, that in American Canyon, you have 2 elementary schools that are actually higher. The enrollment is actually bigger than the size of the proposed middle school. So conclusion, Napa Valley does not have the funds to operate a new middle school, especially a small middle school. And so some of the highlights that I just want to review, we've spent more money than we received in revenues for a number of years. We've paid for this deficit spending by using our savings account or reserve. Our reserve is depleted to just above the legal level. We cut $7 million in 2019, 2020. We need to cut $1.6 million next year. We're going to have to cut $5.6 million in the out year after that. And again, it would cost about $2.1 million to operate American Canyon's new middle school. So at this point, I'm done with the budget part. And so what I am going to go down to right now is talk about the enrollment trends. So enrollment trends are really important. Again, that's what drives our revenues. This is a screenshot of DataQuest. And so one of the things, again, that I heard a lot in talking to different people before I started this work was, well, how do we know your data's right? How can you prove it? And so I just said, I'm not going to use data that from ARIES. Again, our ARIES is our student information system where all the enrollment system starts. From there, the data is certified, it's submitted to CDE, and then it's uploaded to their website with a little bit of a lag. So this is our certified data. And so if you want to run the report yourself, it's called the multi-year summary by grade. This is an example of what it looks like. I'm not going to bore you to death with a bunch of graphs like this that you can't see. Basically, what I just did is I just copy-pasted that into an Excel document, and then I created graphs that, again, I tried to throw in a little artistic talent. Hopefully you like it. So if you take a look at this graph, this shows total enrollment over 5 years. And so over the last 5 years, you can see that district enrollment has dropped by 752 students. Elementary enrollment has dropped by 688 students. This graph is of particular importance, and so as we start to shift to talk about demography and what it looks like in terms of knowing who's going to show up in a school, the easiest way to know how many kids are going to show up in the middle school next year, it's really simple. You get rid of the 8th graders, and then you show the 5th graders. And you can actually, if you go back in time, the biggest driver for enrollment in a school are the kids that are already in the school. If you want to know how many 5th graders you're going to have next year, you look at the number of 4th graders, especially if they're already at that site. So that's the biggest driver there. And so the next big driver that's super important is kinder enrollment. And so what we have in American Canyon, it's very positive. We have a very positive cohort survival. And so what cohort survival means is when a student enters in kinder, over time, they're very likely to stay in the system and graduate high school. And so the cohort survival rate, it actually increases a little bit. It increases by, it's nominal, but it's 3%. But the part, again, that's really important to say, like, okay, well, Rob, how do you know what it's going to look like in high school a couple years out? Or how do you know how you're going to look in middle school in a couple years out? If you look at that kindergarten cohort, you can see it's dropped by 13.75%. And so right now, over the last 5 years, we have the smallest kindergarten cohort we've had. And another thing to point out, this isn't just kinder, this is kinder and TK. And so the way that CDE reports the data, it's kinder and TK students. And so again, we're going to have smaller and smaller cohorts working their way through the system. This is an example of our elementary enrollment. This is sorted low to high, again, just to kind of point out the new proposed middle school would be potentially smaller than our 2 biggest elementary schools here in American Canyon. This is an example right here. I'm looking at secondary enrollment. So secondary enrollment, it's interesting. The decline is a little bit less, especially out here in American Canyon when I look at this specific data. The reason for that is in American Canyon, we have quite a few inter-district transfers that come in from different districts. But it just as a reminder for the board, school districts don't build schools for inter-district transfers. You build schools for students from within your district. And a lot of districts have policies to allow inter-district transfers in where there's space already or where there's already a teacher. You shouldn't be in a situation where you would be, okay, well, we're going to add a new portable because we want to lend in some inters from the outside. We don't build facilities for inters. So these are the 5 schools in American Canyon. So there's 3 elementary, Donaldson Way, Canyon Oaks, Napa Junction, American Canyon Middle School, and American Canyon High School. This graph shows that elementary enrollment in American Canyon in particular has declined by 140 students over the past 5 years. Middle school has dropped a little bit less, only by 45 students. However, the middle school does have quite a few inters. The high school has broken the trend by increasing slightly. So they've increased by 66 students, But if you were to subtract away the inter-district transfers, there'd be a decline. So there's 72 inter-district transfers attending American Canyon High School. So this is a really important slide, and so I've kind of struggled with this a little bit. So I'm gonna need your help. I need to tell a little story with this. And so, you know, I've spent a lot of time looking at the data here, and I don't ever want to find myself while I'm pointing a finger at someone. So again, I always assume positive intent. So what happened? Why are we in this spot where they're like, we talked about building a new middle school, and all of a sudden now we're not, and the community is obviously upset about it. They're here to express what's going on. Like, how did this happen? How did we get here? And so what I want to point out is, I want to point out a little timeline. And so I think finally, after really looking at this, I completely understand the timeline. So I want to remind the group that Measure H passed in June of 2016. And so, and if you think of the way that data is reported, so in June of 2016, this school board, the only certified data that you would have at that time would be the 2014-2015 data, which was 17,278. And so what does that number represent? That represents an all-time high. So if you're gonna go and you're gonna say like, hey, we need to build a new middle school, you know, we bought property at the time, if I recall right. At the time when you bought the property for the high school, you also bought property potentially to use for a middle school. You were going through increasing enrollment. You're talking about a bond. And when you're looking at your enrollment, you can see an increase. The trend is an increase. It's clearly there. But then in the midst, when you're going to pass the bond, probably at about that time, the district office would have seen some decline. They would have seen it in their numbers and maybe in areas or something like that. They wouldn't have seen declining enrollment in terms of certified numbers. It just wouldn't be there at that point in time. But then what happened also, another thing that happened was, I understand the earthquake happened about that time too. So then when the actual language got passed, the language does not mention a new middle school. That is not in the bond language. Just to be really clear to the audience and the board, there is no mention of building a new middle school in the bond language. And so, but when you look at that over time, what do you see? This is what you see right now. You see a giant bell curve, and what that looks like is, it looks like a classic graph of the housing crisis. So if you look at the housing crisis, it's really easy like to look at it in the past and say, yeah, you should have seen that coming. Like you could see a housing crisis come. A lot of people got on their soapboxes and said that. But if you go back and if you look at 14, 15, or even 15, 16, just 1 year out, it's not a trend with just 1 year's worth of data of decline. And where we find ourselves right now, we find ourselves in a spot right now as an organization saying that it's a trend. We have 5 years of it. There is no increasing enrollment. We clearly have declining enrollment. And so it would be, in my mind, and everyone that I've spoken to, it would be irresponsible to throw that out there right now, because what the data that we're talking about right now is a big decline, a historic decline. And then when I shift over to Rob Murray, the demographer, he will talk to you about what's coming through the system. So I'm talking clearly about the historic data. I'm not here to make predictions, but our demographer will make predictions. With the two stories together, or I should say the two facts together, we should be able to make a very good decision on that. And so this is just the basics again of demography. I'm just gonna go over this very briefly. Rob Murray will talk about this again. So the part that he's probably gonna focus on most, he's going to talk about certified enrollment, which I've kind of touched on, but the big picture is births. And so if you want to know who's going to show up for a kindergarten class, it's really simple. You just go back and you figure out, you look at all the births attached to the zip codes for your schools, for your mother's home, the mother's zip code. Based on that, over time, if you keep that data every single year for a long period of time, you can figure out trends and say, okay, if there's 200 births, maybe we expect a 1-to-1. We should maybe expect in 5 years 200 kids for kindergarten. It depends on the area and the mobility of the area. But Rob Murray will talk about that, exactly what it is. And so one of my questions that I had that I mentioned in the beginning of the agenda is, I said, okay, Rob, a lot of people have said, well, we don't trust demographers, we don't trust data. Because when we drive down the highway, we can see all the building. We can see it. We can touch it. We know there's building going on in American Canyon. We've lived this story before. We grew tremendously. How can you prove to me how accurate you are? And so, again, he's in a unique situation. We've been working with them since 2005. So I said, here's what I need you to do. I need you to prove to me how accurate you are based on your other predictions. And so if you look at the table on the far right, you can see that on average, JSA, or Jack Schrader, has been 98.2% accurate since 2011 and 2012. If you look at the far column on the right, obviously over like the further you go out, the less accurate you are because you're predicting further into the future. So again, just a really important point to point out. The draft of his enrollment right here is that we have a decline in 7 years of 1,465 students. So very, very significant decline in enrollment coming up. And so I had another question for him because again, a lot of people, I talked to a lot of people. I talked to people from the city. I talked to different people, and they said, there's a lot of building going on. There's a lot of building going on. You don't understand. The building that's going on is a lot more than the decline in enrollment that's happening due to lower birth rates and having a very expensive area. And I said to him, okay, well, if we were going to open up a new middle school, which has a capacity of about 500 students, let's just assume that we could operate at 80%, meaning that we'd fill it to about 400 kids. Hold everything else constant, all the other factors constant, meaning you would need to make up for the 100 student decline that's expected in the middle school. And how many houses would need to be built in order to justify that? And again, we're talking about 6th through 8th graders. So remember, parents don't birth 6th through 8th graders, right? They're 0 when they're born. So no one got that joke, come on. But so there's different combinations, right? So any of these would work. So just an example, single family detached, 4,736 homes would need to be built. Single family attached, 35,857 homes. And just to put that number in perspective, the population of American Canyon is 20,000. So just to be really clear. The easiest way to get that number up is affordable housing of about 2,000 units. And so and this is kind of a nationwide problem. A lot of cities are struggling with building enough affordable housing. And what we find ourselves in California and the nation, we have very low birth rates. And we also have this housing crisis where the cost of housing is going up dramatically. And so as Rob Murray will point out, he'll show that in American Canyon, when you had this big growth, housing prices since then have gone up 120%. And so, and again, he'll talk about Napa County proper and the fact that Napa County proper, for example, it's on the top 10 list of least affordable places to live. And that's not California. That's not the Bay Area. That's the nation. And you might say to yourself, well, I know for a fact that's wrong because I can think of areas that have more expensive housing. But if you take the expensive housing and you combine it with the low access to high-paying jobs, you create a very unaffordable situation. And so for this last piece that I'm going to talk about right here is I want to talk about the enrollment history of Canyon Oaks. So I've heard this message from, I don't know if anybody in the audience, if I recognize you, but I did hear this history because I know that the school district did build a new school out in American Canyon. And so this goes back a long way. So obviously there's still a lot of hurt there. So that was about 14 years ago. So about 14 years ago when they built this new school, people were excited about it. They all wanted to attend, kind of like Dr. Massetti talked about. And then suddenly in the spring of that year, there was a change of the boundaries. And there was also a change in the type of homes that were built. And so as you saw from the previous graph, the type of homes that are built matters. So if you go from building really expensive homes to more affordable homes, the more affordable homes are going to generate more students. And so as a result, there wasn't enough space for the students in the beginning of the year. And there's a lot of still hurt over that in the community. And it did cause a lot of pain. But that's just not the case here. And that's actually part of the driver of why the school district hired a demographer. So the demographer, who I'm going to pass off to in a minute, was hired right after this happened in Canyon Oaks. And at the time, a demographer, from what I understand, again, I wasn't here, a demographer was not used for that prediction. And so just the last piece I'm going to close with, just again, like what does the facilities planning look like for a school? It looks like 5 years. So again, we build facilities for 5 years. I've heard a lot of people say, well, Rob, if you don't build it now, what's going to happen in 10 years? It's going to be more expensive. Yup, it's going to be more expensive in 10 years, but we build for the next 5 years. We can't afford to operate this new facility for 10 years in the hopes that students will show up. And then again, Rob Murray will talk about the trends there. And that, I'd like to take a moment to pass it off, or actually questions, I think, at this point from the board.
How would you like to proceed, Mr. President Hurtado? Would you like to?
Or you can have statements too if you like, right?
Wait.
You're waiting.
He'll
okay.
wait. No, wait.
Okay. Rob Murray.
right, Superintendent, Board President, members of the board, I'm very happy to be here and just explaining to you in some detail the demographic analysis and the enrollment projections that we have exhaustively analyzed for the community of American Canyon and the 5 schools. Rob Manguela has touched on some of the points I'll be making, but I will be going a little bit deeper into some of the material that he touched on. So again, as he mentioned, we started working for the district in 2005 and do a variety of work, but we're really going to focus here again on that demographic analysis, the enrollment projections, and some of that student generation study. So you've seen this slide already, but again, we have a lot of data, verifiable, certified data from the California Department of Education of existing enrollments. And so we use that. Again, like Rob Manguela said, you know the number of students that you have at certain grade levels at certain schools, and that gives you a very solid indicator of who is then going to show up in those grades 1 through 12 where you already have some students enrolled in the grade before. And then looking at those new kindergarten cohorts, that is really your big, most influential driver, because whenever you have a smaller kindergarten cohort show up, it is coming in and replacing a larger cohort that had come in sometime in the past. Every time that happens, your total enrollment, initially at the elementary schools, but throughout the district and over time, is going to continue to decrease. And we use births as the most reliable indicator of what that future kindergarten is going to look like. That component of the enrollment projection is what I like to call the demographic projection. I'll be showing that on its own first, so that you get a good sense of, just based on those factors, before we look at residential development, what the trajectory of the enrollments in American Canyon are going to look like. Then we can come in with the students generated from residential development. But it's important to know that you don't just add those students to your current enrollments and build up from there. You have to look at your initial demographic trend, what those enrollments are going to look like at the time that housing is constructed, and then form a full picture of what the enrollment might be in those future years. So I'll get into a lot of the details of where this projection came from, and then I'll show it again at the end. But so Rob's presentation showed those darker blue numbers from 4449 down to 4312, actual certified enrollment from the 5 American Canyon schools from the 2014-15 school year through the 2018-19 school year. Again, all of these projections are based on your last certified enrollment data. So moving forward, steady declines, and let me get into some of the reasons why we are projecting this to happen. First, again, Rob has touched on some of this, but the backdrop of what's going on, not just in American Canyon or in Napa Valley Unified, but broadly through the entire greater Bay Area. You will see all kinds of news articles over the last several years of the Bay Area housing crisis, but the way this manifests locally is really your kind of classic economics 101. You have a supply of housing, and you have a demand for housing, and that demand is increasing much more rapidly. Total population in the county is increasing. I actually jumped to my bottom data point because it's one that I found is just very illustrative for locals here, is that in the last 5 years for which we have census data available, and just a side note that we are really looking forward to having the next actual full hard count decennial census so that we can get the most reliable information that we can, but their estimates in the in-between years provide a good, consistent source of information. But according to these estimates, between 5,000 and 7,000 net gain of population in the county, which is equivalent to about another Calistoga. In that same time, about 550 housing units being added to the county, which is only about a fifth of the number of housing units in Calistoga. And that's just illustrative of what's driving some of this price increase. As you can see from some of the charts I provided here of median home sales prices, and looking especially at Napa and American Canyon in comparison. Both have increased in prices. As Rob said, it's about 120% increase just in the prices of American Canyon, but the difference between American Canyon and Napa is also important. It used to be that a home in Napa was about 68% more expensive, 65% actually, I think, more expensive than the median home in American Canyon. That gap has narrowed to about 28% now. So while housing is more affordable in American Canyon, it's not so much more affordable anymore. And if you're looking at the actual sticker price of that housing, it is a very different economic situation than the last time there was a large amount of new housing coming onto the market. And particularly you look at the renter market. According to census data, again, more than 40% of district renter households are spending at least 35% of their income, and this is probably, that's the highest category that the census has on their questionnaire. Some of these households are probably spending quite a bit more than that, and so an increase of a couple of $100s over a couple of years in the rent prices is, for a lot of families, the point at which they decide if they can continue to afford to live where they prefer to live, or if they have to seek out the next closest place to live where they can afford to. And that is really the situation of the broader Bay Area housing crisis. You just see a ripple effect of people priced out of one community moving to the next closest one they can, which in turn forces people out from there. And that's really beginning to hit here. So with all that in mind, we look at births. And as Rob was saying, we see some variation in the ratio here, but it's usually within sight of about a 1-to-1 ratio. You look at births, you look at 5 years later at what your kindergarten enrollment was. It might be a little higher, it might be a little lower, but it's actually going to be pretty close. We can average it out to around a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's important because we look at the number of births now. And a quick note, this birth data, again, like Rob wants to say, verifiable data. So these are all birth totals that you can look up online from the California Department of Public Health. And these are based on the residence of the mother at the time of birth. So even if the birth occurs outside of the county in another hospital, at the state level, all of that is tabulated by zip code of residence, so that we are looking at apples to apples here of American Canyon mothers and the number of births to mothers living in the zip code associated with this city. I have 3 yellow highlights on this table. For 3 of the last 4 years for which birth data is publicly available, births have dipped below 200, and that's the first time this has happened going back to the early 2000s. Even before you get to those low birth profiles, you see with that red highlight, you, as Rob also alluded to, you have your lowest kindergarten enrollment that you've had in recent memory in the most recent year. And I've mentioned it before, I'll say it again, just every time you have a small cohort that enters your system and it replaces a larger cohort that came in earlier, total enrollment based on that alone is going to decline. And now for 3 of the next 4 years, you're looking at historically small cohorts of kindergartners coming into the system. So the next part is the cohort survival. And just to break down about what this means, is this has a lot of factors baked into it. You're looking at the net population shift. You don't live in a bubble. People move in, people move out constantly throughout the year. But on net, you tend to probably have more people moving in than moving out. We're looking at transfers from private schools back into public schools. We're looking, again, as Rob alluded to an increase in the number of inter-district students. But all of that put together, what we're looking at is you have a cohort that starts at a certain size in kindergarten, and as it advances from grade to grade, just on net, again, some of those students are leaving, other ones are new ones coming in, but on net, that cohort is going to grow in size. But the difference is, a lot of those cohorts in the past that started off bigger were also growing. These new smaller cohorts that are coming in are going to grow, but they're starting off in a much smaller position, and again, they are replacing larger cohorts that came before them. So a quick look, just for people who are a little bit more visual. This is something that Rob Manguala alluded to, but those darker blue highlights in the 1819 year, you have at the middle school level in American Canyon, 320 sixth graders, 332 seventh graders, 361 eighth graders. The first thing that we look at is that the next year, those 361 eighth graders move on to high school. You have 298 fifth graders waiting in the wings to step in and replace them at the middle school facility level. So if you follow all of those down and to the right, each of those cohorts gets larger. You have those various factors that lead to net increases in population. But if you look across, your 6th grade is smaller, your 7th grade is smaller, your 8th grade is smaller than the year before. Just because, again, the size of the initial incoming cohort is what's really driving the change here. And then I also just highlighted in yellow, that is the first of the smaller kindergarten cohorts that came into the district. You already have a couple of these smaller cohorts, one in the 2016, one in 2018. Again, we're projecting even smaller cohorts beginning in 2019 based on births. And then that first small cohort, it will be 2022 when that cohort becomes 6th graders. And again, will probably be based on historic trends, smaller than the cohort it replaces at middle school, leading, again, once it reaches to that level, more declines. You've already seen those declines in the elementary school level. So, again, now here, we're not talking about any development, but just based on what I call the demographic enrollment projection, before we add any development, this is what we're looking at just based on births, kindergarten enrollment, cohort survival. So you don't just look at development as building up on what your 2018-19 enrollment numbers are. You look at it as helping to offset and fill in this baseline enrollment decline, because those students have to be built in the years when those units come in. So I need to talk a little bit, and I apologize, this is a lot of text on this slide, so I'm just going to try to get through it as clearly as I can. But we've talked about these student generation rates, and this is basically, we look at recently built units of different types. You have your single-family detached housing versus an attached housing like condominiums or townhomes where you're sharing a wall, typically have smaller yards, renting multifamily housing, and then any kind of affordable housing. All of those generate students at different rates. And then different areas of the district also generate students at different rates. And a lot of that really comes down to just looking at affordability and price in conjunction with that. But we find the student generation rates we want to use. We look at the number of units that we anticipate being developed, and we build in the new students that are going to move into the district from this residential development that wouldn't be there without that development happening. Now, for American Canyon, the quandary that we have is that for single-family housing, there has not been much built the last few years. So what we don't have are recent surveys based on the increasing housing prices. So we wanted to approach this in two different ways and show two different growth models so that we can look at student generation rates that are from the 17-18 board-adopted district-wide survey that have more newer units, and we'll take that into account. And just from some of our other analysis, looking at the American Canyon student generation rates, even both in resales and new construction that have taken place over time, we do see that the newer the unit is, the more expensive it is, the fewer students it generates. So that's one reason we want to show a growth model with student generation rates that are a little more conservative. We also did survey the units that we have in American Canyon in the current year, even if some of them were built several years ago now, and again, were built at a time when they cost maybe half of what an equivalent home would cost today. So the families that bought in then, that are younger families ready to have kids, might have been able to buy in at that time. That same family now might not be able to make the same choice. But we still want to look at, if those higher student generation rates hold up, what might that look like? So we are going to show both of those growth models. So first, the more conservative one, growth model 1. And so looking down at the table, the net result is that for the units that we're including, we're seeing 582 total K-12 students over the 10-year projection period that we're looking at here being generated. It is important to note that for American Canyon, there are two very large projects that are providing the bulk of these students, the Broadway District Specific Plan and Watson Ranch. And so we're going to show primarily a projection that is based on the assumption that those units are constructed in the most favorable schedule possible. But we also want to look at the effect of delays to one or both of those projects. So my next chart will just show what that looks like. Again, the scenario that is the most favorable, that assumes all of these build units on track on the current timelines, is what we'll actually use. But what you see here is that blue line using the more conservative generation rates, but with the most optimistic look at the large project completion, shows that you help offset that demographic enrollment decline and maintain enrollment close to current levels. If either of those two projects or both are delayed, then you see there are some other smaller projects, so you do have an increase above that baseline shown in gray, but it's further out before you reach that stabilization and then increase. So again, if there are any delays to those largest projects, the offset of that natural built-in demographic decline that we see based again on births primarily and those smaller incoming kindergarten cohorts is also going to be delayed. So then we look at the actual surveyed student generation rates from American Canyon using higher student generation rates. This gets you 168 additional students who would be generated, again, over the whole projection period. You don't just take the total of the projection in 2028 and add that number of students to it. Some of those students are generated earlier. They've already graduated the district. By the time you get to the end of the projection, these students are just added into our cohort model. But yes, you do generate more students this way. And then comparing, again, here we're just looking at that first schedule now, assuming that all the biggest projects develop on their current timeframes. You see it definitely does give you a little bit more of an upward trajectory, but again, you're just looking at recovering 7 years out to about current total K-12, TK-12 enrollment levels. So again, just even with those additional students at a higher SGR, what you're really doing is just helping to offset a lot of your underlying enrollment trends. So I want to do a quick look now at some more district and community demographics. So this first chart over here, on the left, what you're looking at is a split of elementary, middle school, and high school enrollment. I will just mention one caveat for anyone who wants to add up all those numbers and compare it to the chart on the right. The chart on the left does not include the handful of ungraded students that are in the district, and that was but when those ungraded students are built in, that's when we then get to the differences that I show on the right. So I just want to make sure it's clear what numbers I'm talking about here. But the main thing I wanted to include with the chart on the left is that you see in 2014-15, 1,819 elementary students. You've had 2 small kindergarten cohorts come into the district already in that time. Current elementary total enrollment is 1,682. Your middle schools and your high school enrollment, and I know Rob already showed you some of these numbers, but you have not seen the decreases there yet, and I'll get to some of the other reasons for that in a moment. But if you look to the chart on the right, you see, you can clearly see the 2 years when those small kindergarten cohorts came in, between 2015 and 2016, and then again between 2017 and 2018. Whenever a smaller kindergarten cohort enters the district and replaces a larger cohort that was there before it, total enrollment is going to decrease. Now, we touched on the number of non-resident students. So again, this is just looking based on the addresses of students provided to us. We have, now it's important, this is not new inter-district students coming in every year, but this is the net total. So from the 114 in 2017, some of those graduated or otherwise left the system, other new ones came in, but the total net number of inter-district students from year to year has been going up. And you'll recall, this is a period when total American Canyon enrollment has been steady to slightly declining. Without this uptick in enrolling students from outside the district, you would have already been seeing larger declines in your enrollment that's actually coming directly from American Canyon. And again, just the vast majority of these students are coming from Vallejo for the American Canyon schools. One more point here is looking at some other data sources. So the California Department of Finance produces some very detailed information. So what I wanted to isolate here, once you get into breaking things out by age ranges, you have to go to it's only available at the county level. But I wanted to look at age ranges because if you just look at total population, again, I mentioned in the housing slide earlier, the county population is increasing. The population of school-aged children is not. And that's tying into those lower birth rates. And if you look at the age 0 population, so people somewhere between being born and having their first birthday, that number fell off in 2017 and 2018, and these are the state's projections now. We're looking at that age 0 population remaining below 2016 levels for the rest of their projection period through 2028, for the next 10 years. We won't really see increases again through that time, and then the age 5 population, when you're going to get your kindergartners, is lagging 5 years behind that. So again, these are from the state's projections. That's the picture that they're painting for you. And that's, again, this is countywide, so there is some difference that I'll acknowledge between American Canyon and the rest of the county. But this is just another data source that I think corroborates a lot of what we're seeing with the local births and what your own kindergarten cohorts in some of the recent years have shown. So one more look, this is the entire, so again, we have lots of different variations, but this is the development scenario 1, so assuming that the big developments stay on their most optimistic build-out assumptions, and the growth model 1 using a little bit more conservative student generation rates. But this is what we're looking at. I already showed you the example of what we're seeing with that middle school enrollment. Again, just larger cohorts coming out, but now looking further into the future, you see that first small cohort coming in 2022. 2 years after that, you have another small cohort, and again, these are ones we already know. That cohort of 213 kindergartners in 2018, that is in your system, and while we anticipate it to grow, it's starting at that noticeably smaller level than a lot of the cohorts that came before it. And if births continue to be a reliable indicator, then 3 of your next 4 years, we can also say, are going to have small cohorts. After that, we're assuming some just steadiness in the birth rate. As birth data comes out, that will be your single most important new data source, as it's available from year to year to keep an eye on, to see when there might be some shifts in this trend. But for now, based on what we're seeing, this is the trend, where again, you have a demographic projection that would lead to declines, and some residential development that helps to offset that, but does not lead to increased enrollment significantly above current levels. And so again, even if you use higher student generation rates, that same basic narrative holds true. And that is the extent of the presentation that I have prepared for you this evening.
So with that, we're going to move into public comment. I'm going to call 3 names at a time so you can queue up to the mic. If someone has already stated your particular opinion, you could consider not coming up and repeating. I'll call everyone. So with that, Adrienne Boudreau, Sabina Wolfson. No, that was my fault. I'll give you a chance to speak. Okay. Hugh Marquez, Dr. Barbara Nemko, and Jason Hutchings.
Hello, my name is Hugh Marquez. I keep hearing about 2 middle schools that we can't fund both. Our middle school right now is overburdened with too many students, and I don't understand why we can't just build 1 middle school. Our school we have now has too many students, and you're talking about decline. And I don't know why the new school couldn't be one and make it for 1,500 students, enough for what we have now and for our future. And if it declines, just like our high school, we have many vacant classrooms that we use for other purposes. So I'm just curious as to why the discussion is on 2 middle schools and we have property and just make it 1 middle school and sell the property, use it, whatever, and not have, because our middle school we have now is definitely overwhelmed with students, and it's causing a very unlearnable scenario in our school. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Barbara Nemco, County Superintendent of Schools. I've been with Napa County Office of Education for 28 years, and it's been my honor to be the county superintendent for 23. So I was here when Napa Valley Unified opened up American Canyon Middle School, and when they opened up Canyon Oaks Elementary School, and the crown jewel that you are currently sitting in, American Canyon High School. And so I fully understand how disappointing it is when we're hearing that we're not going to get another new school. And everybody questions, how could this have happened? Well, declining enrollment has been going on for years, and other districts and counties throughout the state were having this issue. If you look at the current issue of the California School Boards Association, the big article is called Baby Bust. Babies are not being born at the rate that they used to be. You read it too? Yes. And they're not because of a number of reasons, one of which there's so much debt for people who have gone to college that they can't afford it, and people are working on their careers, and so by the time they get started, they can't have as many children as they used to. So we're just not seeing that birth rate. Then you add to that the cost of living, and we are in the perfect storm. Now, when I first heard that there was not going to be a middle school, I probably asked as many questions as anybody in this audience asked. I probably made Rosanna crazy. And I got to see this presentation before. You're sitting there, your eyes are crossing from seeing all those numbers, and you can't really see them. I've seen them, I've looked at them several times. Those numbers are those numbers. They are verifiable, they are true. I don't like it any more than you like it, but that's what happened. Now you add to that, we are still so low in funding in the state of California. We're somewhere, I don't know, 45th ranked. And then the state made all these retirement promises to everybody and realized that they didn't have the money, so what did they do? They raised our rates in schools dramatically. So you've got declining enrollment, you don't have good funding, then they are charging us more, so we are in a world of hurt. And I understand it doesn't feel good, but this is our problem now in the current economy, and everybody's predicting a recession. So these changes have to happen. And as unfortunate as it is, everybody's doing the best they can, and it's painful. There are things we can do to help. We need to help the district get more revenue, and I'll just mention two. Number one, attendance matters. We're not paid by enrollment. We're paid by when kids are in school, as we call it, butts and seats. So don't take your kids on a vacation during school time, please. Get them to school. And then the last thing I say, please, go forth and multiply.
Barbara, Dr. Nemco, when we agendize or prioritize that particular suggestion, we'll ask you to help us craft it.
Greetings, President Hurtado, trustees, Dr. Massetti, and staff. I commend you on holding this meeting here in front of the citizens of American Canyon. My name is Jason Hutchings. I'm a 15-year resident of Yountville, and I'm here in solidarity with the good people of American Canyon because, let's face it, the growth of American Canyon has kept the NVUSD from showing declining enrollment for the past 30 years. Yountville Elementary School has no doubt been a beneficiary of American Canyon's growth. The town of Yountville has a lot of tourists tromping and tramping through it, but the school itself is made up primarily of working class families. We find our school on the chopping block for the third time in the past 10 years. At Tuesday's 7-Eleven committee meeting, the district's declining reserve fund was compared to the members of the audience savings account. The thing is, when my family savings begins to dip, I don't hire statisticians or demographers. I go to work and I find a way to make money. Likewise, when the students of this district are required to take a test, they're asked to answer all the questions on the test and answer them correctly in order to get a good grade. The parents of this district demand that the leaders in this district act accordingly and refrain from existing in a state of hypocrisy. We would like to see a forensic audit, to evaluate the, among other factors, the amount of money that's being doled out to private contractors, and also how much vacant and excess property is already maintained in the district. Let's cut the bacon and keep the schools open, please. Thank you.
Megan Dameron, Jason Kishineff, and Mark Joseph.
Thank you. I'm Megan Dameron, and I have currently a student at Donaldson Way and twins who are very anxious to join him next year. And I'm very disappointed with our current situation, and I'm most concerned with the future damage that this may cause. If by chance these projections be inaccurate, or certainly 10 years from now, things turn around and our enrollment should increase, there's no way we're going to be able to find the funding to have more schools. There's no way that another bond measure is going to pass, having lost the faith and trust of the voters. And that's not just for here in American Canyon, that's for the entire school district. Feeling very much like a bait and switch, it's going to be hard to trust that any future bond measure will be spent accurately. So I hope there's a way where we can make ends meet and find something, whether this is having a school in Watson Ranch that was brought up that maybe does go all the way up to 8th grade, but certainly there is a need here. We're currently already bursting at the seams at our current middle school, and there's a potential we're going to find ourselves in this situation once we do have the Broadway specific plan and the Watson Ranch project. So, thank you.
Good evening. Jason Kishineff, Democratic candidate for Congress and parent here in American Canyon. You all know my views. I've said them a few times. You're never going to convince me that you can accurately predict the future and prove it. My middle child is 14. He's in high school now. During his time at ACMS, he was physically attacked a number of times outside of the class. Not once was there a faculty member around because of the overcrowding. No offense, Mr. Scudero, it's not your fault. One day, my kids came home and told me that another kid whom they've had some trouble with before a few times put another kid in the hospital. They showed me a video that someone posted on Instagram, and sure enough, there was this video of this kid picking this other kid up and slamming him, picking him up in the air and slamming him down again, over and over again. I think it finally was broken up. Dr. Massetti indicated back in May that she didn't want to build a new school until both schools could be at full capacity. I don't believe that's right to wait that long. I believe that when you start thinking, that's when you start thinking of a third school. ACMS is overcrowded now. It was built for 700 kids. It's got 1,100 kids. The faculty is overtaxed. My youngest son has 55 kids in his science class. We cannot wait until we have a third more people here. Thank you.
Councilman.
Good evening. Mark Joseph, Council with the American Canyon City. And I want to thank you all for coming down to American Canyon, and the crowd is thinned out, as you can imagine, since it's gotten so late, but I appreciate the parents being here as well. I want to also point out, as Dr. Nemko, I've been here for a while, and I was here when the first middle school was built, and proud to be a key player in making that happen. I was excited to be at the Canyon Oaks ceremony and showed up when you finally built the high school. So I am proud of your efforts and accomplishments, and I appreciate it. Having listened to the demographic study and being a finance director type, I actually get into spreadsheets and numbers, so it was exciting. But I do have some concerns about the methodology, particularly as it relates to American Canyon. We are somewhat different. Most importantly, our household sizes have always been larger than the rest of the county or other areas. Referencing Canyon Oaks Elementary, I have to take exception to the analysis. I was there and he wasn't. The reason we were oversized is because we were building homes that had 4 to 6 bedrooms. We simply built a lot of house during that time period, and maybe there wasn't a demographic analysis, but the reason Canyon Oaks was undersized is because of the number of homes and the households we had. But beyond that, we're a family-friendly community. Families naturally come here rather than elsewhere. Our older neighborhoods are also ready to turn over as the originals move on. And it is likely that it'll be young families with kids that are the likely targets. And I would recommend you talk to realtors for anecdotal examples. And even the numbers we've given you are probably low because they don't reflect state housing density bonuses or the fact that we just approved in concept 175 units on Oat Hill, and that there are still vacant land that could be filled with more homes. So we may end up with more than the numbers you're projecting, which means that instead of plateauing at around 1,100 for the next 5 or 10 years, it could be slightly higher. So the real issue I have for you is, what's the contingency plan? What if these numbers aren't correct? What if you do need something? You know, don't sell your bonds as it relates to the second middle school. Hang on to that until you know exactly where you want to go and what the numbers really are telling you. More to the point, if you are right, and I'm just, throwing out numbers and what ifs, we're at 1,100 students. We're going to plateau at 1,100 students for the next 10 or 15 years. If 800 is the right size and we're at 1,100, why are you forcing American Canyon's kids to work in an overcrowded environment for that foreseeable future? There's an issue of fairness, and I would encourage that we all work together. I remember when I got here, there was the big issue of the Napa flooding. And everybody got together and they took on the Corps of Engineers, who just wanted to cement the sides, came up with a bold new approach, came up with new funding, and the county is radically different 25 years later. I would like to suggest that we apply that same approach, that win-win approach, instead of pitting one group against the other. Use that same Napa model, or Napa Valley flood model as a model. Use that to address the issues we're dealing with tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Leon Garcia, Eric Altman, and Chris James. Mayor Garcia.
President Hurtado. Well, welcome, good evening. Welcome to American Canyon. It's really good to have you here. I know it's been a long evening, and there's certainly, as you can hear, a very important issue to the people of American Canyon. Dr. Massetti, with all due respect, I appreciate and it concerns me that information requested from the city has not been received. But the reciprocal also concerns me as well. I think it behooves both entities to make sure that requested information is transmitted timely. And I appreciate your effort on that part. Thank you. I think you could gather a flavor of how important this is to American Canyon. That doesn't bypass any of us. I think it's a matter of understanding the demographics. I don't challenge the veracity or validity of the demographics from the school board. What my interest is, and I'm sure the community, is to understand how you arrive at that. And I think the presentation this evening was very good. Thank you, sir. Though it's going to take a while for me to digest it, I'm sure other people as well. In the spirit of working together, I think we can arrive at a solution that meets the needs of the community. The demographic data, somewhat related to the remarks of Mr. Joseph, Watson Ranch is 1,253 houses. There's a chart here that's available on our webpage. Certainly, I'm sure you may have seen it. If you go to the Watson Ranch, this is the physical analysis of Watson Ranch, something I requested as it was being built to assure it was viable. It shows that there's basically no growth occupancy of Watson Ranch until around 2023. This is the rate of 3.4 residents per unit for the 1,253, and it shows that it's 677. By the year 2030, we will arrive at 4,260. And that's just Watson Ranch. I serve on the ABAG Executive Board. Regional-wise, it's 101 cities, all 9 counties. Housing displacement, housing crisis is top on the agenda, virtually every meeting. There's state legislation you may be aware of, some of it pretty onerous, and how to address this. That has changed the housing market and the impact of American Canyon. The general plan here was designed for 25,000. In all likelihood, when all is said and done and we're built out, American Canyon will be closer to 30,000. So I think that has to be taken into consideration with the demographics of American Canyon that impact school populations and size of schools. Not setting aside for myself for a moment, enough folks have spoken to the urgency of the need for it. But I think that needs to be examined as well. Appreciate Dr. Nimco's comments. Go forth and multiply. I attended a workshop. Organization is Government Association for Race and Equity. And the workshop was a presentation on demographics. The speaker said, the median age of white European Americans, 43. Median age of Asians and African American, middle to early 30s. Median age of Latinos, 26. Pause.
That would be me.
Where are all the babies coming from? So yeah, there are demographic changes, and I reflect housing demand as well. Just a few blocks from here, at the boom times, houses in that area sold for $950,000. We called it our $1 million homes. With the bust, they went to half that price. Cycles come and go, that affects housing markets as well. So that would be a trend I would say needs to be in the picture, to be considered. But also the ultimate build out of the city. And at what point will we need the middle school? You hear it urgency now. I can't help but think it'll be even more urgent down the future. I appreciate this ability to come together as a community. I would encourage that we all work together we're very successful with town hall meetings in American Canyon. You can see the turnout here. You know, we dealt with traffic mitigation, with even this high school, cannabis. We all got to something we could live with. And I would urge us all to be engaged in that process to see how we can come to something that satisfies our need. Thank you.
Thank you. I have not forgotten you, okay? I know. Okay.
Hi, my name is Eric Altman. I am lucky enough to serve on the Planning Commission for the City of American Canyon for about a decade at this point. I'm here tonight. I've got 2 kids in the school district, one in the middle school, one at Donaldson Way. Professionally, I am a data analyst, financial analyst. I underwrite surety bonds for public works contractors. So I review financial statements, I review contracts, and so on. So I've spoken with Dr. Musetti in the past. I appreciate the time. And we've talked about data-driven decisions. I love that. I operate on data. Unlike some of my predecessors, I'm going to call into question some of the data that was presented and some of the ways it was presented. There's an old saying that I grew up, my dad used to say, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And it's important to keep that in mind. We had a comment made about how the gap in housing price differential between City of Napa and City of American Canyon went from 68% down to 28%. If you look at that, though, the actual cost difference between homes is about $150,000 per period that you look at. There's one gap where it narrows down to about $110,000, then it widens back up to $150,000. So how does that percentage work? Well, that's mathematics, right? We're all involved in education here, right? It's math. Bigger number, smaller percentage for the gap. That's the kind of statistical information that is, to take the old computer term, garbage in, garbage out. And that's one example that I'm citing of it. I don't have a ton of time, and I haven't had a chance to go through thoroughly all of the information, but at a quick glance, there's a lot of information that's being presented that is nonsensical. Additionally, I will one-up the mayor. I think 30,000 ultimate growth is probably on the low side with some of the additional areas that may well come into the city for future growth. We have about 150,000, about 150 new apartments that are opening up at the corner of Highway 29 and American Canyon Road. They're going to add some students that haven't been counted in here. That's excluding the additional stuff. We heard about 175 apartments on Oat Hill. I know somebody who is looking to put some housing in as part of the Broadway district-specific plan. This is all happening. My guess is the city is going to wind up over 30,000 people, potentially as high as 40,000 people over the next 20-year period. That needs to be factored in as well as other information. I'm out of time. I'll be courteous, but thank you for hearing me out.
Chris James, Tammy Wong, and Belia Ramos.
Hi, thanks for being here this evening. I'm really pleased you came all this way down here. My name is Chris James. I'm a resident of American Canyon, been here coming up on 10 years now. I don't have any kids in the system. I don't have any kids at all. Like many of you, I don't think I actually have kids in the system, right? But I'm very passionate about this. I think it's very important that that we're having this discussion this evening. My concern is the overpopulation right now of Donaldson Way, and some of the stories I've heard of friends and family that have kids there. And I think if we, the risk is that our demographic numbers could be wrong, and it could implode there. Pivoting on what Mayor Garcia said about the house prices and growth and such, prices go up and down. There was a big influx on one of those charts I was seeing when the economy tanked. A lot of people came into the city looking for better school districts. That could happen again. The economy is predicted to have another downfall in the coming years, and who knows what's going to happen. I don't think that's included in the demographics at all. I would really like to see an independent body actually look at this. I know that that you've paid for these demographics. I'm sure he's an expert in his field, but I'm seeing some holes in there based on some other people talking this evening. So I would like to see the school built. I really would like to see it built to alleviate the pressure at the other middle school. It sounds like there's two schools there. I think also there's some unfair distribution of some funds in the Napa Valley. I think St. Helena and some other school district, parts of the school district get more money, see a more fair share of the stick than we do down here. We always seem to prop up the numbers and pay our fair share of the taxes, but we don't see the return. And I know we have had some schools built, but I see some very small schools up Valley. I know there's pressure on to close some of those right now, but I think there's other things that are unfair and balance there. So the risk is, my concern is we could take a risk here, and our kids are going to pay for that. Some of you, I think, have been long-term members on the board. My concern is that someone's going to be left carrying the bag, and it may not be you, right? Some of you may be retiring or moving on, and someone else is going to pick up those pieces. Okay, thank you so much.
Tammy Wong and Belia Ramos.
Good evening. I'm Tammy Wong. I want to thank you for coming to American Canyon to make it easier for the residents to attend. I came here to support having the middle school built. I don't have any kids in the system, but I'm a homeowner here. I pay taxes into it, and I think it would be a great benefit to our community to have a school here to alleviate the overcrowding. I'm a product of the public school system. I know it's valuable. It helped me get where I am today, and I think our kids here are not getting the education that they deserve. And this is going to impact them when they go on to college and higher education. It all starts in the lower schools. If you really enjoy your classes, you enjoy learning, that's what sets you up for life. But anyways, more importantly, I think we need to have better communication. I would like to see the school district work more cooperatively with the city leaders and the stakeholders to figure this out. This type of meeting where you present us information on the day of, we've had no chance to review it, we cannot make informed comments or questions about it, it's unfair. Plus, we only have 3 minutes. It would have been great when you sent out that agenda, that presentation should have been attached. Furthermore, I would encourage the school district to have better communication to members of the community who aren't parents. I live on Wetlands Edge Road, just half a block from this new elementary school that's being built. I went to one of the meetings, I signed up to get updates. You know, I never heard anything about the groundbreaking ceremony happening. I only knew about it because I drove by and saw the stage set up. So please, have more transparency, better communication, and work with your community. Thank you.
Just to note, the presentation, the documents were on the district webpage.
Yes, but not on the agenda. That was sent out.
Good evening, President, trustees, superintendent. My name is Belia Ramos. I stand before you as a community member and resident of American Canyon and as a mom. My comments are my own this evening. The reality of the financial stress facing NVUSD is going to require drastic changes. We have all seen the data and the reality in which you are facing. And we simply can't ignore the $13 million of cuts that must be made to make this district sustainable. That said, I have a request of the district. Slow down. Invite us to the table. This community does not want a wedge driven between programs, facilities, because at the end of the day, it's all about our kids. The philosophical change that has occurred in nixing the second middle school based upon 3-year enrollment data as opposed to planning data is philosophical, and we're going to go ahead and agree to disagree on that one. But the expenditure of the bond money, of which I believe your approximation that you have 39 million allocated for the second middle school that you have not expended in design or in consultants, should be a discussion involving this community. You came to us to support Measure H. Measure H was carried by American Canyon. You needed our votes, and I submit to you, just like you needed our votes and my personal endorsement, you also need our input. Sprinkling the bond money reserved for our second middle school over the entire district is simply not in the best interest of this community or the district as a whole. I do not want us to sit back and let this happen to us. It is of utmost importance to the residents of this community, and we are asking you to come to the table with solutions and allow us to sit at that same table with you. The question before us is, what do we want for our kids? We know exactly where we're at, and it's not a pretty picture. I recognize that. But by sitting at the table and finding our mutual interests and looking at these solutions in, as Councilmember Joseph said, the Napa way is our only solution forward. We can help you. We have ideas. We just need a venue to be able to participate. American Canyon is one of the most progressive and innovative parts of Napa County, and I ask you to invite us to problem solve with you.
Okay, again, due to my error, there were a couple of speakers who should have been called up during public comment. I am going to allow them time now. So Adrienne Boudreau and Sabrina Wolfson.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. My name is Adrienne Boudreau. I'm a parent of 2 Mount George kids, a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. I am also a graduate of Shearer School, and my husband graduated from Snow. So please don't groan at me right now. So I think one of the things that was touched on is the validity of data, and I'm not calling that into question. But the analysis that I did when I first got these numbers, I was comparing the actual data in the demographic report that was available and in the superintendent's report that went out that said enrollment had been declining for 10 solid years. That was not correct. We are about at the same enrollment we were 10 years ago. It's about 200 kids off. So it's done this, but it hasn't been a steady decline. And then another thing was the original claim that we were going to lose 2,000 kids by 25-26. And that number ended up being, according to the information tonight, around 1,465, which is about the number I came up with in my report. And so that's about a 25% difference in what number you're projecting. That's not just a little error in data. That's a pretty big one. And if those are easy numbers that I, as a layperson, can plug into an algorithm, then it hurts the confidence I have in these more complicated numbers that I don't have the experience with. Like the budgets that we've looked at. We've had several different budget slides comparing this chart that was just given with the 7 million in reductions, where we're looking at 2021, a deficit of 1.6 million, the following year 5.6 million. You compare that to the adopted budget, and we're looking at a projection in 2021 of about 500,000. It's not clear what assumptions are made in these budgets. Like I said, I'm not an accountant, but if you are putting information out there, it should have all the explanations in it so that somebody can look at it and see it clearly. So that's just something I wanted to say. And then the other thing, quickly, 49 seconds, future plans. Please help us parents that are looking at these situations, whether it's crowded middle schools or school closures. What are you going to do? How are you going to redraw boundaries? What are we going to have after school care? Parents, that's a reality for. If you move and you don't have after school care because those programs are already crowded, that's going to be a huge problem for a lot of people moving forward. Transportation to those schools, preparing the kids and the teachers at the schools that might be receiving students. How are you going to use the money that you might save closing schools to improve our education overall? All these things that I think involves just thinking, giving us ideas that are things that we can expect, things that we can get involved in, things that we can look forward to, instead of just looking at it as a strictly negative thing. And then take advantage of this public involvement. Put out some parcel tax ideas, put out some taxes for state and local taxes on wine, on hotels, something that we can do to generate revenue, because if this is true, then this problem is going to be here for a long time. So thank you.
Good evening, President Hurtado and members of the board. My name is Sabrina Wolfson, and I'm a Napa native and a Mount George parent. And I'm here tonight to address you regarding school closures. The California Department of Education puts out a guide for best practices for school closure. And in that guide, it talks about gathering the facts. And one of the facts to be gathered is the anticipated fiscal relief from school closures. So we've heard that the small schools cost about between $400,000 and $500,000 to operate, but what we haven't heard is how much will we really save if we close those schools? Yes, you won't have a principal and you won't have an administrator, but you have other costs that are going to carry over with those students. You're going to have to add maybe new portables at the receiving schools. You're going to have increased utility costs. You're going to have increased maintenance and custodial costs as a result of those new students. And you're also probably going to have increased transportation costs. If you eliminate school like Mount George and you send them to another place, you have to get those kids somewhere. So those costs need to be taken into consideration, and that information needs to be provided to the 7-Eleven committee so they know the actual numbers. what will we really save by closing these schools, and will it really solve our budget problem? And also those estimates need to take into consideration that some kids will leave. Some kids will leave and go to private school. That's a given. I don't know how much that will be, but that needs to be taken into consideration. The best practices also talk about exploring feasible options to closing a school. There's been a lot of fear-mongering that if we don't close schools, that they're going to have to be cuts made elsewhere, but we haven't heard about what those costs will be. What types of programs would have to be cut? Is it going to be the lacrosse programs that were just added to the 2 schools for 4 new teams? I mean, yes, it's a desirable program, but is it an essential one, and it should that be put forth instead of saving our elementary schools? And what are the possibilities for increasing revenue? What is the district exploring to ensure that there aren't budget deficits in the future? I haven't heard any alternatives put on the table. Lastly, where will the kids go that are being displaced? The district needs to provide scenarios. So if we close Mount George, where will those kids go? Are they going to go to Vichy? That would make logical sense because it's close. But if you look at your facility capacity report, Vichy only has room for about 14 students. And actually, based on the 2020 projections, it will be over capacity. Northwood's over capacity by 47 students. Puebla Vista's over capacity by 56 students. Browns Valley only has 26 spots left. So where will those kids go? I think that needs to be played out, and that data needs to be given to the 7-Eleven committee too. And then lastly, the receiving schools need to be brought into this discussion as well, because their schools are going to be overcrowded, and how do they feel about that? So they need to be brought into this discussion. And then lastly, I just wanted to address, Dr. Massetti raised the issue of equity. But equity isn't cutting our community's best schools. It's finding a way to integrate our schools and to improve the schools for everybody. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone who provided us with some input, some information and guidance. Seeing no one else, having no other cards, I'm going to now close the public comment part and open this issue up for discussion among board members. Questions, comments? Mr. Gracia.
The first presentation by the first Rob to be very important, particularly in regard to slides. I think they were maybe 28 and 29.
Can we get the slides up, please? Sorry about that.
No worries. In that, it really helps to explain the decision-making process that the district had as it shows at the time of the bond's passage that we're on this very large upward trajectory with growing enrollment, and that just at about the time in the following slide that the bond passes, we're now on a declining enrollment just beginning to start, and then the next few years are all declines, one after another. And so the decision-making and thinking that goes into building schools really needs to be taken into consideration when the demographics change so drastically. Instead of continuing on that large enrollment growth like we had been for the past many years, the numbers take a dip and go the opposite direction. So I really do believe that that's 2 very important slides, and wanted to emphasize the importance of those 2 slides to show why this decision is being re-examined and why that it's somewhat critical that we do so.
Mine is just a statement. I'm pretty much a victim of the finding affordable housing here in Napa County, and kind of on a point that Dr. Barb Nemko mentioned, but on the flip side of college debt. I'm also a highway traveler. I go to agricultural, poultry, cow farms, and orchards and vineyards all throughout the state of California. And so I've been doing this for approximately 15 15 steady years. And I can tell you that I have access to masses of laborers. And so I can confirm that part of the reporting that was presented today is not just for Napa County. I have seen it affecting our labor force and also kind of working its way in waves. People that can't afford Napa move to Vallejo, Fairfield. People that can't afford Fairfield move into Stockton, Lodi. Laborers that I service here in Napa County, they're coming as far as Lodi, Stockton, Yuba City. It's kind of scary. But something that, you know, I want to say maybe it happened during our last meeting, and City Council member Kenneth Leary said, and I won't quote him, but this is pretty much a call to action to all of our politicians, because I don't feel that this is just strictly a Napa Valley Unified School District issue. This is really, and maybe Elba can speak about this, but this is an issue and a conversation about, you know, housing, transportation, immigration, pension costs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so, honestly, I think that we need to really have a conversation on all sides, like Ms. Belia Ramos came to our podium to ask. And yes, I mean, as much as we can slow down the process, we can, but we can't ignore the numbers as well. Thank you.
Leon, I don't know, Mayor Garcia, are you still here? Do you know when the Watson Ranch analytics were produced and if they have been updated to reflect changes possibly in demographics? Do you know? I went online per your suggestion and couldn't find the information. I just was curious when those analytics were produced.
October 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I have a couple of comments, and you know, thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks for staying so late. At the last meeting, I too was struck by what Mr. Leary said at the meeting, and I even mentioned it, you know, at the end of the meeting, the summing up, which was he pointed out that Napa County had an opulent lifestyle, and I agreed with him. I said at times it's even ostentatious. And he talked about the people traveling into our community to work because they can't afford to live here. And I've thought about it a lot because it's true. When I live in downtown Napa, and I can tell you that my neighborhood is almost empty of children, but I've got Airbnbs, which they are contributing to the prosperity of the city with transient occupancy tax when they pay it. But we don't see that. You know, so much of the wealth that is generated and certainly displayed in this community by people who come to it. We do get some philanthropy, but we get nothing from the hotel tax. We get nothing. And when people are exulting because the property values in Napa County are at an all-time high, that really doesn't benefit the schools because of Proposition 13. So we all have to remember that, and you know, we all do have to work together because this is really this is serious. And I've served on another local government before, and I know what it's like to look at a terrible balance sheet. I was on the Napa City Council back in the 90s when, you know, we didn't have any money. So I am taking it seriously. I do want to make a couple of comments. One about sports teams. I've been getting a lot of suggestions from people suggesting that we have like pay to play, don't support sports, you know, well, you know, we're practically doing that now. The lacrosse teams, one of the attractions was from my viewpoint, was I happen to like the sport. And two, the parents were swearing that they were going to fundraise like crazy for it. I mean, it's something that they are willing to take on. Our parents, and I know, and our choir, your all's choir here at American Canyon High School, this outstanding choir, they raise money for things as basic as sheet music. So we're doing that. Everyone is doing that for the extras. Just a few things, in the presentation really surprised me. For example, that the bond language, the language of the bond, does not mention a second middle school. You said that the bond language doesn't mention it. The campaign certainly did. Certainly did. And by the way, it had nothing to do with that, but just so you know. And I just, the other thing, I'm just amazed by that. I really am amazed by that. And so I can understand people's disappointment. And this is something, we all do need to work together and, be nice to each other, because this is, it is affecting our children. I don't take a dark view of the Napa Valley Unified School District's educational programs, because I worked in them and I've just seen too many great things happen. So I'm not losing hope there, but I am taking the finances very seriously. And Mr. Kishnev, thanks for tipping me off about 55 people in a science class. I'm raised his hat, very polite guy. I'm interested in that. I'm going to take a look at that. Thank you.
My first thoughts that come to mind is to really echo what others have been saying and just thank you for your participation. I think that's exactly what we are here for. We're here to listen to your comments, listen to your ideas, listen to your thoughts, because we're still in the middle of the process. We're not coming to any decisions at this time. And it's gonna require those open channels. I do appreciate the invitations, but they need to be real. And they need to be really concise and to the point. They need to happen. Words are great, but actions matter the most. And I've been seeing a lot of actions that really don't create that kind of space. So it's really important to do that. When you wanted us here, we're here. You wanted us to come to the American Canyon, we're here. We're always excited to come here. So I think to continue to open those channels is important. And we've had conversations with other officials who have opened those doors to us. And that's really appreciated, because that's the kind of Napa that we have. We're the type that we look over and we talk to our neighbor. It's the kind of Napa that when you're talking to one person, you're talking to 10 people, right? So it's that community that we have built for a long time. And to have that patience, right? Like, we're still in that process. I think that there's some really great questions. I'm not going to go over which ones in particular caught my interest, but there's definitely some points that we as a board can give direction to our staff, to the staff. As a governing board, not one of us takes role. It's as a group. We all do this together. And I know that we are surrounded by very caring individuals, very passionate and caring individuals. That's the one thing we have in common in this room. We can look at the graphs, we can look at the colors, we can look at the trends, but we all very much deeply care about the kids. So that's one thing that we can't, there's no debate there. There is a real struggle here, right? Because we are looking at the facts, we're looking at the data. It's a lot of data. It's already late in the day, and we're kind of trying to review the data all over my head, but sometimes it's just not humanly possible to do that. But that's exactly what it is. It's just going to continue to take that time. I do think that that there is a process in place. I do think that we've had the space and the opportunity to provide that input. Thank you for the feedback about the information on the agenda or website or whatnot. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. So if there's something that's not clear, we're seeing every email come in and every email answered. So if that's not happening, that's important to know. So those points of communication are really key to the ongoing conversations in order to find the solution that's going to make everyone happy. But then that's also another thing that's scary, right? Not everyone's going to be happy. We all know that. That's a reality that doesn't exist. There's always going to be something out there that is not going to be perfect, because that is just, that's only where dreams come true, I suppose. And the other point that I wanted to make is to really continue, and I'll end with this, to continue to invite that input. So I'm the kind of person that I have peers to me that are like, wow, good luck tonight. And I was like, we got this. This is a beautiful process to me, to see a space where our community members can come and share their thoughts, because then as a community member, as a member of the community, that's one of my most important roles is to listen to the community. But at the same time, I cannot deny the pages and pages of facts and numbers that are in front of me. That it's happening very quickly. The word crisis has been shared many times, and that's really what we're facing. And it's really scary times, because I do not want to be in a school district where we're losing control of our schools, because that's where it gets really, really bad. Just watching what's happening in Vallejo it's really sad. And I don't want us to get there. So I think that as we continue to communicate, we will continue to make the right decisions. Thank you.
I sort of enjoy the discussion of demographics. Sorry. I think I've, over time, underappreciated the need for continual renewal of the population of school-age children, not just anticipated growth. It means the turnover in a housing stock to families with school-age children. I look forward to the offers of collaboration offered by the two planning commissioners and the city council members regarding an exchange of data and plans. I believe our fellow elected, some of which were here tonight, are mindful of the impact on communities with regard to housing policies. Over the last 10, 12, 15 years, I've seen a change in the actions the city councils in all of our jurisdictions have made, the cognizance with various state agencies, because the impact is not just here in Napa Valley, it is throughout the Bay Area and throughout most of California. I draw that conclusion based on our communities no longer accepting in lieu of fees, but actually insisting developers actually build the housing. There's more and more discussion around actually having developers build low and moderate income housing as part of their projects. So I do believe our fellow elected are taking into account the impacts to our communities. The schools are part of that. Time, however, is of the essence simply because of the squirrely way schools are funded, because the impact to the district is far more immediate than some of these longer-term items that were brought up. So at some point, we will have to reconcile the timeline and get to the point where we can perhaps enjoy some of the future growth and future plans that the people have raised. As my contribution to the history lesson tonight, this isn't the first time the district has had to grapple with declining enrollment. However, the last time was 40 years ago and is generally beyond most people's recollection at this point. I dare say what was happening in the late 70s and early 80s was even more tenuous than what we face. I believe we can work through this. That is not to say that there won't be some pain involved, but I don't think it's quite as bad as it was 40 years ago.
It is never wise to wait until Joe speaks to ask a question. He so eloquently stated some of the things I wanted to say, but I would ask for those that came to the podium that made suggestions that the data was skewed, or that they had question about the demographics, or the assumptive nature of thinking that we would manipulate data, to please at least come forward and bring data, hard evidence that suggests a different way of thinking. It's really hard to compare apples to apples when you're telling me that we're comparing apples to oranges. So what I would really like and appreciate is, I think those that have done a great deal of work on their analysis is to provide your analysis so that we can all speak the same language, so that we can have fair discussions, so that we can all come to the table, because I think that's everybody's intent. We are not, as Dr. Massetti said originally, and so well, is that we are all in the same business. We do want to educate our kids. It's an imperative to all of us. Don't ever think that we don't feel what you feel, or that these issues aren't as equally important to us as they are to you. We are all involved in this business for very similar reasons, and we want to make decisions that serve the entire district. But we also have to work within the context of what we have. We have to be very realistic about the financial implications of our decision and the educational implications of our decisions. So let's come to the table with data that you believe can be supported, that is verifiable data, and let's compare them. And let's, as everyone has said, work together, understanding that our intent is always to do the right thing.
Again, I want to thank everyone for attending and participating in this very important discussion. I just have a few points, and then we'll move on. First of all, I want to assure people that those of us who are veteran members of this board never think about leaving the board and having the next board pick up any pieces. That's just not in my nature. And having worked with Mr. Shunk for more than the 15 years I've been on the board, I know that's not in his nature. So we're working hard to make sure that the decisions we make will allow future boards to make even more important decisions in the future. One of the reasons that Dr. Massetti's candidacy for superintendent of Napa Valley Unified School District was special was in her in the exercise that we had all candidates go through. She talked about revenue generation. It's really difficult for a new superintendent to develop any revenue generation projects in the middle of declining enrollment when our crisis is imminent. But that was very impressive, and that's one of the reasons that she's sitting up here with us. So I have every confidence that once we get this part of it handled, that we can move into the revenue generation era of Napa Valley Unified School District. I remember running for this office back in 2004, and I called my good friend Leon Garcia, who was actually a student of mine, and he was an A student at the college. Just wanted people to know. And I asked Leon, what do I need to do to get to know people around here and get votes? And he said, well, just spend a morning with me on a Sunday morning. And I said, sure, why not? He took me to church. I hadn't been to church in years. And the walls didn't come down. That was good. Thank you very much, Leon. And then he took me to just about every constituency group in American Canyon. And that was something I will always be grateful for. Since that time, I and most of the board have walked shoulder to shoulder with the residents of American Canyon, particularly when we put projects for American Canyon on bond measures, and we had people like a certain association who were telling us that we should not because they weren't really part of Napa anyway. Well, and we told them that, you know, well, what are you, crazy? And they are, but that's another subject that I won't go into this evening. But since that time, all the boards that I've had the honor to serve on, have seen American Canyon as an equal partner in providing for the education and safety of our children. And we hope to continue that through this crisis. I feel like, you know, I feel like confession, like I'm in confession. One of the things I've had a problem with for a long time, and we're seeing kind of what happens with that, is that we talk about doing things the Napa way. Well, you know, to be perfectly honest, the Napa way is what got us here. We wanted somebody to talk about, we wanted somebody who could lead us out of what we'd been doing for years and years. We saw a vision of what Napa Valley Unified School District could become, and we were smart enough to offer her a job. We need to form new relationships with all the constituency groups. We have directed our staff through Dr. Massetti to continue our tradition of cooperation with all our jurisdictions, including American Canyon, and we will continue to direct that. But as Leon said, as Mr. Mayor said, that has to be an equal, that has to be a give and take. And we will cooperate with the city of American Canyon to find a solution to this issue. That's my promise. Don't anybody write that one down. Uh-oh, I already, uh-oh. Uh-oh, no. Oh, no. Maybe I'll become an influencer. Is that what they're called? And look, just finally, you know, I was thinking, I'm going to finish up with this. I was thinking that, you know, and I love stats. I love your presentations. But I thought at one point, you know, if we go much longer, it could be a Brown Act violation because we're going to chase everyone out of here. But thank you for the detail. We need that. We need that. We need to make sure you know what we're using to make decisions. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank you for your participation, for your contributions. I want to thank some of you more than others, but I'll thank you all. And thank you. We'll, anytime you would like this to come down, let us know. We're happy. I'm always happy to come down here. So thank you very much. Point 1, Human Resources, J.1A, request to hire teacher less than fully credentialed.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Mr. Shunk. All in favor?
Aye.
J2, J.2.A, local control funding formula budget overview for parents.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Ms. Water. All in favor?
Aye.
J.2.B, Sylvan Learning Center contract.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Shunk, seconded by Ms. Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
J.2.C, amendment to contract between, is that right? Amendment to contract between NVUSD and On the Move.
So moved?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gonzalez Mares, seconded by Ms. Jankowicz. All in favor?
Aye.
Item J.3.A, J. Linear Inspection Services for 4 finished kitchens.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Mr. Shunk. All in favor?
Aye.
J.3.B, change order number 5 for Central Kitchen, project to S.W. Allen Change Construction, Inc.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gracia,
Second.
second by Ms. Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
J.3.C, Elisher Associates, Inc., commissioning services for River School.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gracia,
Second.
second by Mrs. Gonzalez Mares. All in favor? Aye. J.3.D, amendment number 2 to Schrader and Associates.
I wanted to have a little discussion on this one.
Okay.
Okay,
But I'll give you a motion so we can continue
Okay.
discussing.
I'll second it then, but I do want to discuss.
I need staff in here. I lost some staff outside. Can you please get Mike Pearson and Rob Manguala back in? They'll be in trouble later.
should we move on?
Should we pass it until they come back?
There they are.
Oh, okay.
Where's Rob Manguala?
We got him. Thank you.
We still have a meeting, folks. The trustees have a question for you, I believe.
I do.
On the Schrader and Associates amendment number 2.
I was not entirely clear. I was hoping to get a little more information on what we're getting for our $23,000.
So the Schrader and Associates, the main thing is they've been doing the demographic study going forward, the additional work, and so Schrader pays Rob King, so Rob number 2. Anything else?
Is that good?
Hours of amusement, yes. Hours of amusement, yeah. So I guess maybe I should be paying because I've been the most amused by his comments.
Are you good, Mr. Gracia?
I believe we are. So it's just paying for the extra work that we've been having him do as regard to this presentation that he had tonight and things of that nature.
And things of that nature. Again, looking at the demographic study, trying to get updated units and so forth. So updating the study.
And Trustee Gracia, it's informing both the work, as you saw, I believe you were there, the 7-Eleven committee work around school closures. So there's the expansive demographic work that's hyper-focusing on that demographic area, and also the issue of the American Canyon Middle School. So just making sure our current demographic analytics are up to date and accurate.
Okay, I'm good then.
Okay, so it was moved by Mr. Shunk and seconded by Mr. Gracia. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
J.3.E, I was practicing, Quattrochi Quack, architectural services for 1 relocatable at West Park Elementary School.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Ms. Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
J.3.F, Measure H, River School Network Equipment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gracia, seconded by Mr. Shunk. All in favor?
Aye.
J.3.G, appraisal of 4 Napa Valley properties, Alta Heights, Mount George, West Park, and Yountville for the purpose of the 7-Eleven District Advisory Committee process.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Gonzalez Mares, seconded by Mr. Gracia. All in favor?
Aye.
I think we're,
I went out of order for my reports. I apologize. But I did it so that we can.
you're on report.
Please.
Yeah, and we have not had, the K-1 special education has not had a meeting, Trustee Hurtado.
Right.
And we have not had the American Canyon Liaison Representative meeting since the last board meeting.
Okay.
Not recently.
Okay, so we are at adjournment?
Are we at L?
Additional suggestions or comments from, the board members.
Well,
Or so-
I just, I was reading the minutes, and folks, I just realized something. I talk a lot about food, okay, and I'm going to stop that. But although the lunches are pretty good, but you know what? I was reading the minutes and sort of thinking about the meeting, and I'd like to say to Mr. Hurtado that I really appreciated your comment at the end of one of the meetings where you said that we cared about all our students. Thank you very much.
It's true.
Yeah.
Future agenda items. Nope.
Motion to adjourn.
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. It was moved by Mr. Gracia,
Second.
second by Gonzalez Mares and Martin. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you.